Have you ever noticed how much of your life is spent thinking about other people, their opinions, their actions, their success, and what they might think about you? Without realizing it, your mind becomes trapped in a silent prison where your happiness depends on everyone else's behavior. But according to the teachings of Gautama Buddha, the moment you stop trying to control the world and start focusing on yourself is the moment your real freedom begins. Most people will never learn this lesson, and they will spend their entire lives reacting to things that do not truly matter. In this video, you will discover 7 powerful Buddhist lessons that will help you stop worrying about everyone else and finally take back control of your mind and your life. 1. The world is too busy to live your life for you. Many people spend their lives worrying about how others see them. They think about what people might say, how they might judge them, or whether their decisions will be accepted. This constant concern about other people's opinions can quietly control a person's life. Instead of making choices based on their own values, people begin shaping their behavior around what they believe others expect. However, the truth is that most people are far more focused on their own problems than on anyone else's life. Everyone is dealing with their own concerns, ambitions, and struggles. While it may feel like the world is constantly watching, the reality is that people rarely pay as much attention as we imagine. When you understand this, something important changes in your mind. You begin to realize that you do not need to live according to imagined expectations. You can start making decisions that truly align with your own goals and personal growth. Focusing on yourself means recognizing that your life is your responsibility, not something that should be guided by the passing opinions of others. 2. Your energy goes where your attention goes. Attention is one of the most powerful forces in human life. Wherever your attention goes, your energy naturally follows. If your mind is constantly focused on what others are doing, how they are living, or what they might think about you, your mental energy slowly becomes scattered. Instead of investing your time and focus into building your own life, you end up watching and reacting to someone else's life. Over time, this habit quietly drains motivation and leaves you feeling distracted and unfulfilled. This is why comparison often leads to dissatisfaction. When people measure their worth against others, they stop recognizing their own progress. They begin thinking that someone else is ahead, someone else is doing better, or someone else has achieved more. These thoughts create unnecessary pressure and make people forget how far they have already come. Instead of appreciating their own efforts, the mind becomes filled with worries, doubts, and distractions that weaken confidence. In Buddhism, great importance is placed on awareness and the direction of attention. The mind becomes shaped by whatever it repeatedly focuses on. If your attention is constantly moving outward toward other people, your mind becomes restless and easily influenced. But when you turn your attention inward, something different begins to happen. You start noticing your own habits, your own patterns of thinking, and the areas where real improvement can take place. When your attention is directed toward your own growth, your own discipline, and your own daily actions, your energy begins working for you instead of against you. Small efforts start creating meaningful progress. Your mind becomes clearer because it is no longer pulled in many directions at once. Instead of reacting to everything around you, you begin moving forward with intention and purpose. The more you focus on your own path, the less control outside distractions have over your mind. Other people's opinions, achievements, or lifestyles begin to lose their influence over your sense of direction. Your energy stays where it truly belongs, on the life you are building for yourself. Over time, this simple shift in attention creates greater clarity, stronger discipline, and a deeper sense of peace. 3. You cannot control the world, only your mind. One of the most important lessons in Buddhism is the understanding that much of our suffering comes from trying to control things that are outside of our control. People often expect the world to behave in a certain way. They want others to understand them, agree with them, treat them fairly, and act according to their expectations. But reality rarely follows these expectations, and when it does not, frustration and disappointment quickly appear. The truth is that the world is constantly changing, and people will always behave according to their own thoughts, emotions, and circumstances. Someone may misunderstand you, disagree with you, or treat you in a way that feels unfair. These situations are a normal part of life, but many people spend a great deal of energy trying to change or control them. This struggle often leads to stress because we are trying to manage things that were never fully in our power to begin with. Buddhist teachings, inspired by the wisdom of Gautama Buddha, remind us that real peace does not come from controlling the outside world. Instead, it comes from learning to understand and manage our own mind. While we may not be able to control what others say or do, we can control how we respond to those situations. We can decide whether to react with anger, worry, or calm awareness. When your focus shifts from trying to control the world to strengthening your own mind, life becomes much clearer. Instead of feeling constantly disturbed by other people's behavior, you develop the ability to stay steady and thoughtful. You begin to recognize that your reactions are choices, and those choices shape your inner peace. Focusing on yourself means placing your attention where your real power exists within your own thoughts, actions, and attitudes. As you develop this awareness, you start experiencing a deeper sense of stability. Even when the world around you feels unpredictable, your mind becomes a place of balance and control. 4. Most drama exists only because you participate in it. One of the most overlooked truths about conflict in life is that most drama does not survive on its own. It continues to exist because people keep feeding it with attention, emotion, and reaction. When someone criticizes you, misunderstands you, or behaves in a difficult way, the natural instinct is often to defend yourself, argue, or prove that you are right. But every time you react emotionally, you add more fuel to the situation. What might have been a small moment can quickly grow into a much larger conflict simply because both sides keep responding to it. In daily life, this pattern happens more often than people realize. Someone makes a negative comment, and the mind immediately begins creating a response. Someone disagrees with your opinion, and suddenly the conversation turns into an argument. A small misunderstanding becomes a long, emotional battle. Many people believe they are defending their dignity or protecting their reputation, but in reality, they are often just extending unnecessary conflict. Buddhist teachings encourage a different way of looking at these situations. The wisdom associated with Gautama Buddha reminds us that awareness and restraint are powerful forms of strength. Instead of reacting immediately, we can pause and observe what is actually happening. We can ask ourselves whether the situation truly deserves our energy or whether it is simply another moment of unnecessary drama. When you step back and observe calmly, you begin to notice something important. Many conflicts only continue because people keep responding to them. If one person refuses to participate in the argument, the conflict often loses its momentum. Without emotional reactions to feed it, the situation slowly fades away on its own. This does not mean you should ignore every problem in life. Some situations require clear communication and firm boundaries. However, many everyday conflicts are not truly important. They are simply emotional reactions, temporary disagreements, or attempts by others to pull you into unnecessary tension. When you learn to recognize this, you gain the ability to choose your response wisely. Focusing on yourself helps you see which situations truly matter and which ones do not. Instead of reacting automatically, you become more thoughtful and deliberate in your actions. You begin protecting your peace rather than sacrificing it for arguments that lead nowhere. Over time, This awareness transforms the way you experience the world. You start noticing that many people are constantly caught in cycles of drama, arguments, and emotional battles. They spend their days reacting to comments, defending themselves, and trying to prove something to others. Their minds remain restless because they are always involved in someone else's conflict. But when you stop participating in unnecessary drama, your life becomes noticeably calmer. You conserve your energy for things that actually contribute to your growth. Instead of being pulled into every disagreement or emotional situation, you stay focused on your own path. This quiet discipline may seem simple, but it is incredibly powerful. The moment you stop reacting to every criticism, every opinion, and every provocation, many of the problems that once disturbed your peace begin to disappear. Not because the world has changed, but because you have chosen not to feed those situations with your attention. In this way, focusing on yourself becomes a form of protection for your mind. You learn that peace is not created by winning arguments or proving others wrong. Peace is created when you understand which battles are worth your energy and which ones are better left behind. 5. Your growth requires solitude. Many people today are uncomfortable with the idea of being alone. The modern world encourages constant connection, constant conversation, and constant distraction. Phones, social media, and endless opinions from others fill almost every moment of silence. Because of this, many people begin to believe that being alone means something is wrong, as if solitude is a sign of loneliness or rejection. But Buddhist wisdom teaches a very different understanding of solitude. In the teachings associated with Gautama Buddha, solitude is not seen as a weakness. Instead, it is often described as one of the most powerful environments for inner growth. When the mind is constantly surrounded by noise, expectations, and opinions from other people, it becomes very difficult to truly understand oneself. The mind becomes reactive, always responding to the outside world instead of observing its own thoughts. Solitude creates a space where the mind can slow down. In quiet moments, you begin to notice patterns that are normally hidden by daily distractions. You start recognizing your habits, your fears, your motivations, and the beliefs that quietly shape your behavior. Without solitude, many people move through life without ever examining these deeper parts of themselves. When you spend time alone in a healthy and reflective way, your mind gradually becomes clearer. Instead of constantly absorbing the energy and expectations of others, you begin listening to your own thoughts more carefully. This is where real self-awareness begins to develop. You start asking important questions about your direction, your values, and the type of person you want to become. Growth requires this kind of reflection. Improvement rarely happens when the mind is constantly busy reacting to outside influences. When people are always surrounded by others, they often adopt the habits, attitudes, and priorities of the group around them. While connection with others is valuable, personal transformation usually requires moments of stepping back and observing your life from a distance. Solitude also strengthens discipline. When you are alone, your choices are no longer influenced by pressure from others. You decide how to spend your time, how to organize your thoughts, and how to improve your habits. In these quiet spaces, you begin building a relationship with yourself. You learn how to guide your own mind instead of relying on external validation or constant social interaction. Many of the most profound insights people experience happen when they are alone with their thoughts. Writers, philosophers, and spiritual teachers throughout history often spent long periods in solitude because it allowed them to think deeply and observe life with greater clarity. The Buddha himself spent years in quiet reflection before sharing his understanding of suffering and peace with the world. Focusing on yourself sometimes means accepting moments of solitude without fear. It means recognizing that being alone can be an opportunity for growth rather than something to avoid. During these quiet moments, your mind becomes less influenced by the noise of the outside world and more connected to your own awareness. Over time, solitude helps develop inner stability. When you become comfortable with your own company, you no longer depend on constant attention, approval, or entertainment from others. Your happiness becomes less dependent on external circumstances because you have built a deeper connection with your own mind. This does not mean rejecting relationships or isolating yourself from the world. Buddhism does not teach people to abandon connection with others. Instead, it encourages balance. Solitude provides the clarity needed to understand yourself, while healthy relationships provide opportunities for compassion and shared experience. When solitude and connection are balanced, growth becomes natural. But without moments of quiet reflection, the mind easily becomes lost in the noise of other people's expectations and distractions. Your growth requires time where your attention belongs fully to yourself. In those quiet spaces, you begin to understand your thoughts more clearly, strengthen your discipline, and develop the inner awareness that leads to lasting peace. 6. Your path is different from everyone else's. One of the most common reasons people lose focus on themselves is because they constantly compare their journey with the journey of others. It is very easy to fall into this habit. Everywhere you look, you see people sharing their achievements, their success, their progress, and their lifestyles. When the mind keeps observing these things, it slowly begins to ask a dangerous question: am I falling behind? This single thought has the power to disturb the mind and weaken confidence. Comparison creates a silent pressure that many people carry every day without even realizing it. Someone sees another person achieving something earlier in life, and suddenly they begin doubting their own direction. Someone else appears more successful, more confident, or more recognized, and the mind immediately starts measuring itself against that image. Over time, this habit slowly shifts attention away from personal growth and places it onto someone else's path. But Buddhism teaches a very important truth about life. Every human being is walking a different path shaped by unique experiences, circumstances, and lessons. There is no universal timeline that everyone must follow. Life does not operate according to a single schedule where everyone must reach the same milestones at the same time. Each person moves forward according to their own understanding, their own struggles, and their own opportunities. The teachings associated with Gautama Buddha emphasize awareness and understanding rather than imitation. The Buddha encouraged individuals to observe their own minds and develop wisdom based on their own experiences. He understood that blindly copying the path of others often leads to confusion rather than clarity. When people constantly compare themselves with others, they begin losing awareness of their own progress. They stop recognizing the lessons they have already learned and the improvements they have already made. Instead of appreciating their own journey, they become trapped in the illusion that someone else's life represents the correct way to live. However, life is far more complex than what we see from the outside. When we look at someone else's success, we rarely see the full story behind it. We do not see their personal struggles, their doubts, their failures, or the challenges they had to overcome. We only see a small part of their journey, often the part they choose to share with the world. Because of this limited view, comparison often creates unrealistic expectations. The mind begins to believe that progress should happen quickly, that success should appear easily, or that life should follow a smooth and predictable path. But real growth rarely works that way. Most meaningful development happens slowly through patience, discipline, and continuous learning. Focusing on your own path requires accepting that your life will unfold in its own way. Some lessons may take years to understand. Some goals may require more time and effort than you initially expected. At times, you may feel like you are moving slowly compared to others. But slow progress does not mean failure. It simply means your journey is developing according to your circumstances. When you stop comparing yourself to others, something powerful begins to happen inside your mind. The pressure that once controlled your thinking begins to fade. Instead of constantly measuring your life against someone else's timeline, you start paying attention to your own development. You begin asking more meaningful questions. Am I learning? Am I growing? Am I becoming wiser than I was yesterday? These questions shift your focus back to what truly matters. Your attention moves away from external competition and returns to internal improvement. Growth becomes a personal process rather than a race against others. Another important aspect of walking your own path is understanding that mistakes and setbacks are part of the journey. When people compare themselves to others, they often feel discouraged when they encounter obstacles. They believe that successful people never struggle or fail, but in reality, every meaningful path includes moments of uncertainty and difficulty. Buddhist philosophy encourages patience during these moments. Instead of judging yourself harshly for moving slowly or facing challenges, you learn to observe the situation with calm awareness. Each obstacle becomes an opportunity to learn something new about yourself and about life. When you focus on your own path, you begin seeing growth in places you once ignored. Small improvements in discipline, understanding, and awareness start becoming more meaningful than external recognition. You realize that the true measure of progress is not how quickly you move compared to others, but how much you develop as a person over time. Walking your own path also strengthens independence. When your life is no longer guided by comparison, your decisions become clearer and more authentic. Instead of chasing goals simply because others value them, you start pursuing things that truly align with your values and interests. This creates a deeper sense of purpose because your actions are no longer driven by external pressure. Over time, this independence builds confidence. You begin trusting your own judgment more than the opinions of others. The outside world may still offer advice, criticism, or praise, but these things no longer control your direction. Your path becomes guided by awareness rather than approval. Another powerful benefit of focusing on your own journey is that it brings peace to the mind. Comparison creates endless tension because there will always be someone who appears more successful, more talented, or more advanced in some area of life. If your happiness depends on being ahead of others, the mind will never feel satisfied. But when your focus returns to your own growth, the competition disappears. Instead of trying to prove yourself to the world, you begin concentrating on becoming a wiser and more balanced person. Progress becomes a personal experience rather than a public performance. This shift in perspective changes how you experience life. Achievements become meaningful not because they impress others, but because they reflect your effort and development. Mistakes become valuable lessons rather than reasons for shame. Each step forward, no matter how small, becomes part of a journey that belongs uniquely to you. Focusing on your own path also encourages compassion toward others. When you stop competing with people, you begin seeing them differently. Instead of viewing others as rivals, you recognize that they are simply walking their own journeys with their own struggles and goals. This understanding creates a sense of connection rather than conflict. Life becomes less about comparison and more about understanding. Each person is learning different lessons and facing different challenges. Your responsibility is not to match their progress, but to continue learning and growing in your own way. Ultimately, the path of life is not meant to be identical for everyone. Diversity in experiences, timing, and understanding is what makes human life rich and meaningful. Trying to force your life to look like someone else's only leads to frustration and confusion. When you accept that your path is unique, you give yourself permission to grow naturally. You stop rushing through life trying to reach someone else's destination. Instead, you move forward step by step, learning, adapting, and strengthening your awareness along the way. Focusing on yourself means honoring the journey that belongs specifically to you. It means trusting that your progress will unfold according to your efforts, your patience, and your understanding. Over time, this mindset creates not only confidence but also deep inner peace. Because when you stop comparing your path with others, you finally begin walking your own. 7. Inner peace is built from within. Many people spend their entire lives searching for peace in the outside world. They believe that happiness will finally arrive when certain conditions are met. Some think peace will come when they earn more money, achieve success, gain recognition, or find the perfect relationship. Others believe their lives will become calm once their problems disappear or when the people around them finally understand them. Because of this belief, people spend years chasing external situations that they hope will bring lasting satisfaction. However, Buddhist wisdom teaches something very different. According to the teachings associated with Gautama Buddha, true peace cannot be permanently created by external circumstances. The outside world is constantly changing. Situations improve and decline, relationships shift, opportunities appear and disappear, and life itself moves through cycles of gain and loss. If a person depends entirely on these changing conditions for happiness, their peace will always remain unstable. This is why Buddhism places such strong emphasis on the mind. The Buddha observed that suffering often arises not from events themselves, but from the way the mind reacts to them. Two people can experience the same situation, yet their inner responses can be completely different. One person may become overwhelmed by anger or anxiety, while another remains calm and balanced. The difference is not always the situation itself, but the condition of the mind observing it. Inner peace begins when a person starts understanding this truth. Instead of constantly trying to arrange the outside world into perfect conditions, they begin focusing on the inner environment of their own thoughts and emotions. This shift is incredibly powerful because it places control back into the one place where real influence exists, the mind. When you focus on your own mind, you begin noticing how quickly thoughts can create emotional reactions. A single negative thought can trigger worry, frustration, or fear. A misunderstanding can lead to anger. A memory of the past can suddenly disturb the present moment. Without awareness, the mind moves automatically through these reactions, creating emotional turbulence even when the external situation may not be severe. Through awareness, however, a person begins observing these reactions instead of being controlled by them. You start recognizing that thoughts are not permanent truths, but temporary mental events passing through the mind. Instead of immediately believing every thought that appears, you learn to watch them with patience and curiosity. This ability to observe your own thoughts gradually changes how you experience life. When difficult situations arise, your mind no longer reacts with the same intensity as before. Instead of becoming trapped in anger or fear, you begin pausing and observing the situation more clearly. This pause creates space between the event and your reaction, allowing wisdom to guide your response. Inner peace grows within this space. Many people assume peace means the complete absence of problems. They imagine a life where nothing goes wrong and everything happens exactly as they hope. But this expectation often leads to disappointment because life will always contain uncertainty and challenges. Buddhism teaches that peace does not come from eliminating all difficulties, but from changing how the mind relates to them. When the mind becomes steady, external difficulties lose much of their power. Problems may still appear, but they no longer create the same level of emotional chaos. A calm mind can face challenges with clarity and patience rather than panic or frustration. This stability is one of the most valuable forms of strength a person can develop. Another important aspect of inner peace is learning to release attachment. Much of the tension people feel in life comes from holding too tightly to expectations. They expect situations to unfold exactly the way they imagine. They expect people to behave according to their preferences. When reality fails to match these expectations, disappointment arises. Buddhist philosophy encourages a more flexible relationship with life. Instead of demanding that reality always satisfy personal desires, you begin accepting that change is part of existence. People change, circumstances change, and life rarely follows a perfectly predictable path. When you accept this truth deeply, the mind becomes less resistant to change. Acceptance does not mean passively giving up on goals or ambitions. It simply means understanding that control over life is limited. You can influence your actions, your effort, and your mindset, but you cannot guarantee every outcome. By accepting this reality, you release the mental tension that comes from trying to control everything. Inner peace also grows when you stop allowing other people's behavior to determine your emotional state. Many people unknowingly give enormous power to the opinions and actions of others. A negative comment, a disagreement, or a moment of criticism can disturb their mood for hours or even days. This happens because the mind becomes dependent on external validation. When you develop inner awareness, this dependency begins to weaken. You realize that other people's opinions are reflections of their own perspectives, experiences, and emotions. They are not absolute definitions of your worth or value. Instead of reacting emotionally to every judgment, you begin observing these situations with calm understanding. This change brings a new level of emotional independence. Your mood is no longer controlled by every comment or disagreement you encounter. You become more stable because your sense of worth comes from your own understanding rather than from external approval. Another important element of inner peace is learning to simplify the mind. Modern life often overwhelms people with constant stimulation, endless information, and continuous distraction. The mind becomes crowded with worries about the future, regrets about the past, and reactions to events that may not even matter in the long run. Buddhist teachings encourage returning attention to the present moment. When you focus on what is happening right now, rather than constantly replaying the past or predicting the future, the mind naturally becomes calmer. Many anxieties disappear when attention returns to the present, because the imagined problems of the mind lose their intensity. Through practices like mindfulness, reflection, and quiet observation, people begin reconnecting with the present moment. Simple activities such as breathing, walking, or observing nature become opportunities to calm the mind and return to awareness. Over time, this habit strengthens the mind's ability to remain steady even during stressful situations. As inner peace develops, your relationship with the world begins to change. Situations that once caused strong emotional reactions begin to appear less threatening. You start seeing challenges as temporary experiences rather than permanent problems. This perspective allows you to move through life with greater balance and patience. Focusing on yourself plays a crucial role in this transformation. When your attention is constantly directed outward toward other people's opinions, conflicts, and expectations, the mind becomes unstable. But when your attention returns inward, you begin cultivating the qualities that create lasting peace, awareness, patience, discipline, and understanding. Over time, this inner work creates a foundation that external events cannot easily disturb. Even when life presents difficulties, your mind remains steady because it has learned how to observe situations calmly rather than reacting impulsively. Inner peace does not appear suddenly. It develops gradually through consistent awareness and self-understanding. Each moment of observation, each act of patience, and each effort to understand your thoughts contributes to building this stability. The outside world will always continue changing. New challenges will appear, people will behave unpredictably, and life will constantly evolve. But when peace is built within the mind, these changes no longer control your happiness. Your peace becomes something deeper and more reliable, a quiet strength that remains present regardless of what happens around you. When you truly understand this lesson, something profound begins to happen. You stop searching for peace in places where it can never permanently exist. Instead, you begin cultivating it within your own awareness. And that is where lasting peace is always found. 8. The freedom of letting the world be. One of the most liberating realizations a person can have is understanding that the world does not need to behave exactly the way we want it to. Many people live with the quiet belief that peace will arrive once everything around them starts aligning with their expectations. They believe life will finally feel calm when people understand them better, when circumstances become more predictable, or when the world stops creating obstacles in their path. But the deeper you observe life, the clearer it becomes that the world is constantly moving, constantly changing, and rarely adjusting itself to satisfy individual expectations. Buddhist wisdom, shaped by the teachings of Gautama Buddha, reminds us that trying to control the behavior of the world is like trying to control the wind. You may wish the wind would move in a certain direction, but it follows its own nature. The same is true for people, situations, and events. Everyone is acting according to their own thoughts, emotions, experiences, and understanding of life. Expecting the entire world to operate according to our personal preferences is a heavy burden for the mind to carry. When people constantly try to control everything around them, the mind becomes tense and exhausted. Every disagreement feels like a personal attack. Every unexpected change feels like a problem, and every moment of uncertainty becomes a source of anxiety. The mind begins to believe that peace is impossible unless the external world becomes perfectly organized and cooperative. But since life rarely behaves that way, frustration becomes a constant companion. The freedom of letting the world be begins when a person stops trying to force life into a rigid shape. Instead of demanding that everything unfold according to their expectations, they begin observing life with acceptance and patience. This does not mean becoming passive or indifferent. It means understanding that some aspects of life can be influenced by our actions, while many others cannot. When you release the need to control everything, the mind suddenly becomes lighter. Situations that once caused stress no longer feel as overwhelming. People may still behave unpredictably, and events may still unfold differently than expected, but your inner stability remains intact. Instead of reacting with frustration or resistance, you develop the ability to adapt calmly to whatever life presents. Letting the world be also helps you recognize how much unnecessary tension comes from constantly judging situations. Many people spend their days mentally evaluating everything around them. They judge whether something is fair or unfair, good or bad, acceptable or unacceptable. This habit creates endless internal commentary that drains energy and keeps the mind in a state of agitation. Through awareness, you begin noticing that not every situation requires judgment. Some events are simply part of the natural flow of life. When the mind stops labeling everything as a problem, the experience of life becomes less heavy. You start seeing situations more clearly rather than through the filter of constant emotional reaction. Another powerful effect of letting the world be is that it frees you from the exhausting need to prove yourself to others. Many people spend enormous amounts of time defending their opinions, explaining their decisions, and trying to convince others to see things the same way they do. While communication can be valuable, the constant need for validation often leads to frustration. When you understand that everyone views life through their own perspective, you stop expecting universal agreement. People may disagree with you, misunderstand you, or interpret your actions differently than you intended. But instead of seeing this as a threat, you begin accepting it as a natural part of human diversity. Each person carries their own beliefs and experiences, and those differences are part of what makes the world complex. By allowing others to hold their own perspectives without feeling the need to correct or convince them, you protect your mental peace. Your energy is no longer spent in endless debates or emotional struggles. Instead, it remains available for your own growth and understanding. Letting the world be also transforms how you experience change. Many people resist change because they fear uncertainty. They want life to remain predictable and familiar, believing that stability can only exist when circumstances remain the same. But the reality of life is that change is constant. Seasons change, relationships evolve, opportunities appear and disappear, and every moment moves naturally into the next. When you resist this natural movement of life, the mind becomes tense. But when you learn to move with change instead of fighting against it, the experience of life becomes smoother. You begin trusting that even unexpected situations can carry lessons and opportunities for growth. This perspective does not mean that every situation will be pleasant or easy. Challenges are an inevitable part of life. However, the difference lies in how the mind responds. When you stop demanding that life behave perfectly, you gain the flexibility to respond wisely rather than react emotionally. Another benefit of letting the world be is that it helps you stay focused on what truly belongs to you. Your thoughts, your actions, your habits, and your intentions are within your influence. These are the areas where your effort can create meaningful change. When your attention stays focused on these aspects of life, growth becomes more natural and effective. But when your attention becomes trapped in trying to manage other people's behavior or control every external situation, your energy becomes divided. Instead of building your own path, you become entangled in problems that do not truly belong to you. Focusing on yourself while allowing the world to move according to its own nature creates a powerful balance. You remain engaged with life, but you are not overwhelmed by it. You continue working toward your goals and improving yourself, but you do so with a calm awareness that not everything must unfold according to your expectations. This balance gradually strengthens emotional resilience. Situations that once caused stress begin to appear less threatening. You develop patience with circumstances and compassion toward people who may behave differently than you would prefer. Perhaps most importantly, letting the world be teaches the mind humility. It reminds us that life is larger and more complex than our personal desires. No single person controls the flow of existence. Recognizing this truth allows the mind to relax its grip on rigid expectations and embrace a more open and flexible relationship with life. As this understanding deepens, something remarkable begins to happen. The constant tension between your expectations and reality slowly dissolves. Life still presents surprises, challenges, and unexpected turns, but they no longer disturb your inner balance in the same way. You start experiencing life as a continuous unfolding rather than a series of problems to be controlled. Each moment becomes part of a larger journey rather than a battle that must be won. In this way, letting the world be becomes a form of freedom. You are no longer trapped in the exhausting effort of trying to shape everything around you. Instead, you focus on developing wisdom, patience, and awareness within yourself. The world continues moving, people continue behaving according to their own paths, and life continues changing as it always has. But your mind becomes steady because it is no longer fighting against the natural flow of existence. When you truly understand this lesson, you realize something profound. Peace was never hidden somewhere in the outside world, waiting to be discovered. It was always waiting within your ability to release control, accept change, and allow life to unfold with calm awareness. And once this understanding settles into the mind, the world may continue doing whatever it wants, but your peace remains untouched. 9. The mind becomes free when you stop chasing approval. One of the quiet struggles that many people carry throughout their lives is the constant desire to be accepted, approved, and validated by others. From an early age, people begin learning to shape their behavior based on how others react. They seek praise, avoid criticism, and gradually build their identity around the opinions of the people around them. While this may seem normal in everyday life, it can slowly become one of the greatest obstacles to inner peace. The teachings associated with Gautama Buddha often point toward the importance of understanding the mind and freeing it from unnecessary attachments. One of the most subtle attachments is the attachment to approval. When the mind becomes dependent on the recognition or acceptance of others, it loses its independence. A person's emotional state begins to rise and fall based on how others respond to them. This pattern is easy to observe. A kind word from someone may lift the mood for hours, while a single criticism can disturb the mind for an entire day. When approval becomes the foundation of self-worth, the mind becomes fragile. It constantly seeks reassurance from the outside world, hoping to feel secure through the reactions of others. But because people's opinions are always changing, this search rarely provides lasting stability. Many people do not realize how much energy they spend trying to maintain approval. They adjust their personality depending on the people around them. They hesitate to speak honestly because they fear disagreement. They pursue goals not because those goals truly matter to them, but because they believe those achievements will impress others. Over time, this behavior slowly disconnects a person from their own authentic direction. Buddhist philosophy encourages a deeper form of awareness that helps people recognize this pattern. When you observe the mind carefully, you begin to notice how strongly it reacts to praise and criticism. Praise creates pleasure, while criticism creates discomfort. The mind then begins chasing situations that provide approval, while avoiding situations that might lead to disapproval. This cycle can quietly control a person's life. Instead of making decisions based on wisdom or personal values, choices become guided by the desire to maintain a positive image. A person may stay silent when they should speak, agree when they actually disagree, or pursue paths that do not truly reflect their inner calling. The problem with this pattern is that it places control of your emotional well-being into the hands of others. When approval becomes the source of happiness, peace becomes unstable. The mind remains dependent on something that is constantly changing. People's opinions shift based on their mood, their experiences, and their personal beliefs. What one person praises today, another may criticize tomorrow. Trying to satisfy every perspective becomes impossible. The more you chase approval, the more exhausted the mind becomes. Freedom begins when a person recognizes that approval is not a reliable foundation for peace. Instead of constantly adjusting themselves to please others, they begin asking deeper questions about their own intentions and values. What kind of person do I want to become? What actions truly reflect my understanding of life? What choices align with my own sense of meaning? When these questions become more important than the opinions of others, the mind begins to change. Decisions are no longer guided primarily by the desire to be liked or admired. Instead, actions begin reflecting personal integrity and awareness. This shift creates a powerful form of independence. You still listen to others and remain open to learning, but your sense of worth is no longer controlled by their approval. Praise becomes pleasant, but not necessary. Criticism becomes something to consider calmly, rather than something that defines your value. Another important aspect of freeing the mind from approval is understanding that every person views the world through their own perspective. Each individual carries their own experiences, beliefs, and expectations. Because of this, it is impossible for everyone to see you in the same way. Some people may appreciate your choices, while others may disagree with them. Some may respect your direction, while others may question it. These differences do not necessarily mean that one perspective is right and the other is wrong. They simply reflect the diversity of human experience. When you understand this clearly, the need to convince everyone begins to fade. You realize that universal approval is neither realistic nor necessary. Instead of trying to control how others see you, you focus on living according to your own understanding of what is meaningful and wise. Letting go of the need for approval also helps develop emotional strength. When criticism appears, the mind no longer reacts with the same intensity. Instead of immediately feeling threatened or defensive, you observe the situation more calmly. You may consider whether the criticism contains useful insight, but you do not allow it to destroy your inner balance. Similarly, praise no longer creates an inflated sense of identity. While appreciation from others can be encouraging, you recognize that it is only one perspective among many. Your sense of self becomes grounded in your own awareness rather than external recognition. Over time, this independence transforms the way you experience relationships. Instead of interacting with people primarily to gain approval, you begin relating to them with authenticity. Conversations become more honest because you are not constantly filtering your thoughts to maintain a certain image. Relationships become healthier because they are based on genuine connection rather than performance. Focusing on yourself does not mean rejecting kindness or ignoring the feelings of others. Compassion and respect remain important values in Buddhism. The difference is that your actions come from understanding rather than from the fear of rejection. When compassion guides your behavior, you naturally treat others with care and respect, but you do not lose yourself in the process. Your kindness becomes an expression of wisdom rather than an attempt to gain validation. Another powerful result of releasing the need for approval is the growth of inner stability. Because your peace is no longer dependent on how others respond, emotional ups and downs begin to settle. Situations that once caused anxiety now appear less threatening. You become more comfortable expressing your ideas, making your own choices, and following your own path. Even when others disagree, your sense of direction remains steady because it comes from inner clarity rather than external pressure. This stability also allows you to grow more effectively. When you are no longer afraid of criticism, you become more open to learning. Feedback becomes an opportunity for improvement rather than something to fear. Without the constant need to protect your image, the mind becomes more flexible and willing to evolve. Over time, the freedom created by this mindset becomes deeply satisfying. Life feels lighter because you are no longer carrying the heavy responsibility of pleasing everyone. Your attention returns to what truly matters, developing wisdom, strengthening your character, and living with awareness. The world will always contain opinions, judgments, and expectations. People will continue evaluating one another according to their own beliefs and experiences. But when your peace is rooted within your own understanding, these opinions lose their power to disturb your mind. You begin living from a place of quiet confidence rather than constant approval seeking. Your actions reflect your values rather than the shifting expectations of others. And in this freedom, something remarkable happens. The mind becomes calm, steady, and clear because it is no longer chasing validation from the outside world. Instead, it rests in the understanding that true worth and true peace come from within. When you stop chasing approval, you finally begin living your own life. 10. The quiet power of returning to yourself. In a world that constantly pulls attention outward, One of the most powerful things a person can learn is how to return to themselves. Every day, the mind is surrounded by noise, opinions, expectations, arguments, comparisons, and endless information. People are constantly reacting to what others say, what others do, and what others think. Without realizing it, the mind becomes scattered across many different directions. Instead of living from a place of clarity, people begin living in reaction to everything happening around them. Buddhist wisdom, shaped by the teachings of Gautama Buddha, reminds us that the greatest source of stability does not come from the outside world. It comes from the ability to return to the quiet center of our own awareness. When the mind learns how to return to itself, it becomes less influenced by external chaos and more connected to inner understanding. Returning to yourself means reconnecting with your own awareness rather than constantly reacting to the world. It means noticing your thoughts, your emotions, and your intentions instead of allowing them to run automatically. Most people spend very little time observing their own mind. They move quickly from one reaction to another without ever pausing to understand what is happening within them. Because of this, life often feels overwhelming. A comment from someone may trigger anger. A situation at work may trigger anxiety. A memory from the past may suddenly disturb the present moment. The mind jumps from thought to thought, carrying emotional reactions that seem difficult to control. But when you begin practicing the simple act of returning to yourself, the relationship with your mind starts to change. Instead of being carried away by every thought, you begin noticing those thoughts as they appear. You recognize that feelings of frustration, fear, or excitement are temporary experiences moving through the mind. They are not permanent truths, and they do not need to control your actions. This awareness creates space inside the mind. Within that space, you gain the ability to choose how you respond rather than reacting automatically. For example, imagine someone speaks to you in a way that feels disrespectful. Without awareness, the mind may immediately react with anger. Words are exchanged, emotions escalate, and the situation becomes a conflict. But when you have learned how to return to yourself, something different happens. Instead of reacting instantly, you notice the emotional response rising within you. You pause. You observe the feeling rather than becoming controlled by it. This small moment of awareness changes everything. The situation no longer controls your response. Instead, your awareness guides your action. The practice of returning to yourself also helps you understand your deeper motivations. Many people move through life following habits they never question. They pursue certain goals because society expects them to. They behave in certain ways because they want approval. They avoid certain choices because they fear judgment. When you take time to return to yourself, these patterns become clearer. You begin asking deeper questions about your life. What truly matters to you? What values guide your decisions? What kind of person do you want to become? These questions often remain hidden when life is filled with constant distraction. But when you create moments of quiet awareness, the answers slowly begin to emerge. Another important aspect of returning to yourself is learning to listen to the present moment. Many people live either in the past or in the future. They replay old mistakes, regrets, and memories that no longer exist. Or they imagine future problems, worries, and uncertainties that may never happen. The mind becomes trapped between what has already happened and what has not yet happened. Buddhist teachings encourage a different relationship with time. Instead of being lost in the past or anxious about the future, you learn to bring attention back to the present moment. The present moment is the only place where life is actually happening. When your awareness returns to the present, the mind naturally becomes calmer and clearer. Simple experiences, breathing, walking, observing nature, or listening carefully become opportunities to reconnect with awareness. These moments remind the mind that peace is often available in the simplicity of the present. Returning to yourself also strengthens emotional resilience. When challenges appear, the mind no longer feels completely overwhelmed. Instead of immediately reacting with fear or frustration, you pause and reconnect with awareness. This pause allows wisdom to guide your response rather than impulsive emotion. Over time, this practice builds a strong inner foundation. External situations may still change, but your sense of stability becomes less dependent on those changes. You begin realizing that peace does not require the world to behave perfectly. Peace becomes something that grows from your ability to remain aware and balanced within yourself. Another benefit of returning to yourself is that it improves your relationships with others. When people are disconnected from their own awareness, they often react emotionally during conversations. They interrupt, defend themselves, or misinterpret situations because their mind is already overwhelmed. But when you are connected with your own awareness, you listen more carefully, you respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. Conversations become calmer and more meaningful because you are not bringing unnecessary emotional tension into the interaction. This awareness also helps develop compassion. When you understand your own thoughts and emotions more clearly, you begin recognizing that others experience similar struggles. People act out of fear, confusion, or misunderstanding just as you sometimes do. Instead of responding with judgment, you begin responding with patience and understanding. Returning to yourself, therefore, creates both inner peace and deeper connection with others. However, this practice requires patience. The mind is naturally restless, especially in a world filled with constant stimulation. At first, it may feel difficult to pause and observe your thoughts. The mind may quickly jump back into old habits of reaction and distraction. But each time you notice this happening and gently bring your attention back to awareness, you strengthen the habit of returning to yourself. Gradually, the mind becomes more familiar with this quiet space of observation. Over weeks, months, and years, this simple practice creates profound changes in how you experience life. Situations that once created strong emotional reactions begin to appear less overwhelming. The mind develops a calm strength that allows you to face challenges with clarity. You begin realizing that the greatest source of stability was never hidden somewhere in the outside world. It was always available within your own awareness. This understanding transforms the way you move through life. Instead of being pushed and pulled by every situation, you remain grounded in the quiet center of your own mind. The outside world may continue changing, people may continue expressing different opinions, and life may continue presenting unexpected events. But your awareness becomes the place you return to again and again. In this quiet place, the mind finds balance. In this balance, peace begins to grow, and in that peace, you discover the quiet power that comes from truly returning to yourself. 13. The discipline of guarding your mind. One of the most important lessons in Buddhist philosophy is the understanding that the mind is the source of both suffering and freedom. Everything we experience in life passes through the mind first. A single thought can create joy, anger, fear, or peace. Because of this, learning how to guard the mind becomes one of the most powerful disciplines a person can develop. The teachings connected to Gautama Buddha often emphasize that the mind is like a gate. Every moment, different thoughts, emotions, and influences attempt to enter. Some of these influences are helpful and bring clarity or compassion. Others bring distraction, negativity, or confusion. If a person does not develop awareness of what enters their mind, it becomes easy for harmful patterns of thinking to take control. In daily life, people rarely pay attention to what they allow into their minds. They absorb endless streams of information, opinions, and emotional energy from the world around them. Conversations filled with negativity, media filled with conflict, and environments filled with comparison can slowly shape the mind without a person even noticing. Over time, these influences create mental habits that affect how a person thinks and reacts to life. Guarding the mind begins with awareness. It means paying attention to the thoughts that repeatedly appear in your mind and recognizing how they influence your emotions and actions. When a person begins observing their thoughts carefully, they often notice patterns that have been running automatically for years. Certain thoughts may lead to anxiety. Others may trigger anger or self-doubt. Without awareness, these patterns quietly shape behavior and emotional reactions. Through mindfulness, a person begins interrupting these automatic patterns. Instead of immediately believing every thought that appears, they pause and observe it. They ask themselves whether the thought is helpful or harmful. This simple act of observation creates distance between the mind and the thought itself. For example, a thought such as, "I am not good enough," may appear in the mind during a difficult moment. Without awareness, this thought may quickly create feelings of discouragement or defeat. But when the mind is trained to observe thoughts carefully, the person recognizes that the thought is simply a mental event rather than a permanent truth. This awareness weakens the thought's power and allows the mind to return to a more balanced state. Guarding the mind also involves choosing what kinds of influences you allow into your daily life. The environments you spend time in, the conversations you participate in, and the information you consume all shape your mental landscape. If a person constantly surrounds themselves with negativity, gossip, anger, or comparison, the mind naturally begins reflecting those patterns. On the other hand, when a person seeks environments that encourage wisdom, kindness, and reflection, the mind gradually becomes calmer and more balanced. Just as the body becomes healthier when nourished with good food, the mind becomes stronger when nourished with healthy influences. Another aspect of guarding the mind is learning to recognize emotional triggers. Certain situations or interactions may create strong emotional reactions within us. A harsh comment, a disagreement, or a moment of criticism can suddenly activate feelings of anger or hurt. Without awareness, these reactions can lead to impulsive behavior or unnecessary conflict. However, when a person develops the discipline of guarding the mind, they begin noticing these emotional triggers more clearly. Instead of reacting immediately, they pause and observe the emotion rising within them. This pause creates an opportunity to respond with wisdom rather than with automatic reaction. This practice requires patience because the mind is naturally restless. Thoughts appear quickly and emotions can rise suddenly. But each time a person observes their thoughts without immediately reacting, they strengthen the habit of awareness. Over time, this awareness transforms the relationship between the person and their mind. Instead of being controlled by every thought and emotion, the individual begins guiding the mind with intention and understanding. Guarding the mind also helps reduce unnecessary suffering. Much of the stress people experience comes not from the events themselves, but from the stories the mind creates about those events. The mind often exaggerates problems, imagines worst-case scenarios, or replays painful memories repeatedly. These mental habits create emotional pain even when the external situation may not be severe. When awareness becomes stronger, these patterns become easier to recognize. A person begins noticing when the mind starts creating unnecessary worry or tension. Instead of feeding those thoughts with more attention, they gently return their focus to the present moment. This ability to redirect attention is one of the most powerful tools for maintaining inner peace. The mind becomes less trapped in cycles of overthinking and more connected to the present experience. Another important benefit of guarding the mind is the development of emotional balance. Life will always include moments of success and moments of difficulty. Without awareness, the mind may become overly attached to positive experiences and deeply disturbed by negative ones. This creates a cycle of emotional highs and lows that can make life feel unstable. Through disciplined awareness, the mind learns to remain balanced regardless of changing circumstances. Positive experiences are appreciated without becoming overly attached to them, while difficult experiences are observed without allowing them to destroy inner peace. This balance creates a deeper form of stability that is not easily shaken by external events. The person becomes less reactive and more thoughtful in how they approach life. Guarding the mind also strengthens personal responsibility. Instead of blaming circumstances or other people for emotional reactions, the individual recognizes that their own thoughts and interpretations play a powerful role in shaping their experience. This understanding empowers a person to work with their mind rather than feeling helpless against it. As this discipline grows, a person begins experiencing greater clarity. Decisions become easier because the mind is no longer clouded by constant emotional reaction. Relationships improve because responses become calmer and more thoughtful. Challenges become easier to navigate because the mind remains steady instead of overwhelmed. Over time, guarding the mind becomes a natural part of daily life. Awareness quietly observes thoughts and emotions without needing constant effort. The mind becomes more spacious, allowing wisdom and compassion to guide actions. This practice does not mean eliminating all thoughts or emotions. The mind will always produce ideas, memories, and feelings, but instead of becoming controlled by them, a person learns how to observe them with calm understanding. Through this discipline, the mind gradually becomes a place of clarity rather than confusion. Thoughts become tools for understanding rather than sources of suffering. Emotions become signals to observe rather than forces that control behavior. In this way, guarding the mind becomes one of the most powerful paths toward inner freedom. When the mind is protected through awareness, external events lose their ability to disturb inner peace so easily. The world may continue presenting challenges, opinions, and distractions, but when the mind is guarded with wisdom and awareness, it remains steady regardless of those changes. And within that steady awareness, true peace begins to grow. 14. The courage to walk alone. One of the most difficult lessons for many people to accept is that personal growth often requires walking alone for a period of time. Human beings naturally seek connection, approval, and companionship. From childhood onward, people are taught to belong to groups, to follow social expectations, and to avoid standing apart from others. Because of this conditioning, the idea of walking a different path can feel uncomfortable or even frightening. However, many spiritual traditions, including the teachings associated with Gautama Buddha, emphasize that deep transformation often begins with the courage to step away from the crowd. This does not mean rejecting other people or isolating yourself from society. Instead, it means developing the strength to follow your own understanding of life, even when others choose a different direction. Most people live their lives according to the expectations of those around them. They choose careers, habits, and goals based on what society values or what their community expects. While this can create a sense of belonging, it can also lead people away from their true path. When individuals constantly adjust themselves to match the desires of others, they may slowly lose connection with their own inner voice. Walking alone begins when a person decides to listen to that inner voice again. This moment often arrives during times of reflection or challenge. A person may realize that the path they have been following does not truly align with their values or understanding. They may begin questioning certain habits, relationships, or priorities that once seemed normal. This awakening can feel confusing because it creates a gap between the person's inner truth and the expectations of the outside world. Choosing to follow that inner truth requires courage. It means accepting that not everyone will understand your decisions. Some people may question your direction. Others may criticize or doubt your choices. When someone begins changing their mindset or pursuing personal growth, it can make others uncomfortable, especially if those changes challenge familiar patterns. For this reason, walking your own path sometimes means experiencing moments of loneliness. You may find yourself stepping away from certain conversations, environments, or activities that no longer support your growth. While these moments can feel difficult, they are often part of the transformation process. Buddhist philosophy recognizes that true understanding often develops in quiet reflection rather than constant social activity. When a person spends time observing their thoughts and examining their life carefully, they begin discovering insights that cannot easily emerge in a noisy environment. These insights gradually shape a new perspective on life. During this process, the mind may feel uncertain. Old habits and familiar surroundings once provided comfort and identity. As those patterns begin to change, it may feel like stepping into unknown territory. But this uncertainty is often a sign that genuine growth is taking place. Walking alone does not mean you are lost. It means you are learning to navigate life using your own awareness rather than relying entirely on the opinions of others. Another important aspect of walking your own path is learning to trust your understanding. Many people hesitate to follow their inner wisdom because they fear making mistakes. They believe that safety comes from following the majority or seeking constant guidance from others. While advice and shared knowledge can be valuable, relying entirely on external direction can prevent personal growth. Each person must eventually learn how to think clearly, evaluate situations, and make decisions based on their own awareness. When you begin trusting your understanding, confidence gradually develops. This confidence is different from arrogance or pride. It is a quiet form of self-trust that comes from knowing you are acting according to your best understanding of what is right. Even when mistakes occur, they become opportunities for learning rather than reasons for shame. Every path includes moments of trial and error. Walking alone allows you to experience these lessons directly and develop deeper wisdom through experience. Over time, the fear of standing apart from others begins to fade. You realize that the approval of the crowd is not necessary for living a meaningful life. What matters more is the alignment between your actions and your inner understanding. Walking your own path also helps clarify which relationships are truly supportive. When you begin living with authenticity, some connections may naturally fade because they were based on old habits or expectations. At the same time, new relationships may emerge with people who share similar values or perspectives. These connections tend to be deeper and more genuine because they are not built on superficial approval. Instead, they are grounded in mutual respect and shared understanding. Another benefit of walking alone is that it strengthens emotional independence. When people constantly rely on external validation, their mood often depends on how others respond to them. A compliment may bring temporary happiness, while criticism may create distress. But when you learn to stand confidently in your own path, emotional stability grows. Praise and criticism still exist, but they no longer control your sense of direction. You become less reactive to the shifting opinions of others because your confidence comes from within. This independence also allows you to contribute more positively to the world. When a person is constantly seeking approval, they often hesitate to speak honestly or act courageously. But someone who has developed inner confidence can express ideas and values with clarity and calmness. Throughout history, many individuals who created meaningful change in the world were people who were willing to stand apart from the crowd. They were not driven by popularity, but by conviction and understanding. Their courage to follow their path eventually influenced others and contributed to progress. Buddhism teaches that wisdom often emerges through this kind of independent reflection. The Buddha himself encouraged individuals to examine teachings carefully rather than accepting ideas blindly. He believed that true understanding develops when people observe life directly and think deeply about their experiences. Walking alone, therefore, becomes an important stage of self-discovery. It allows a person to step outside automatic habits and examine life with fresh awareness. During this time, the mind learns to rely less on external approval and more on inner clarity. As this clarity grows, the feeling of loneliness often begins to transform into something different. Solitude becomes an opportunity rather than a burden. Quiet moments become spaces where reflection, creativity, and understanding can flourish. Eventually, walking alone no longer feels like isolation. Instead, it feels like freedom. You realize that your path does not need to match the expectations of everyone around you. Life becomes less about fitting into a predetermined mold and more about developing wisdom and compassion through your own experiences. This freedom also brings a deeper appreciation for connection. When you are comfortable standing on your own, relationships become choices rather than necessities. You can connect with others from a place of authenticity rather than dependence. In this way, walking alone becomes one of the most powerful steps toward self-understanding. It teaches patience because growth does not always happen quickly. It teaches courage because following your own path requires strength. It teaches wisdom because reflection reveals insights that distraction often hides. Most importantly, it teaches you that peace does not come from blending into the crowd. It comes from living in alignment with your deepest understanding of life. The world may continue moving in many different directions, and the crowd may follow whatever path seems popular at the moment. But when you have the courage to walk your own path, you discover something that many people spend their lives searching for. You discover the quiet strength of knowing who you are and why you walk the way you do. 15. The peace that comes from accepting what is. One of the deepest forms of peace a person can experience comes from learning how to accept life as it truly is. Many people spend years struggling against reality. They resist situations they cannot change, replay events that have already happened, and constantly imagine how things should have been different. This resistance creates a continuous tension within the mind. Instead of allowing life to unfold naturally, the mind becomes trapped in an endless argument with reality. The teachings associated with Gautama Buddha often emphasize the importance of seeing life clearly and responding to it with understanding rather than resistance. According to Buddhist philosophy, much of the suffering people experience does not come directly from events themselves, but from the mental struggle against those events. When the mind refuses to accept what has already happened, it begins carrying unnecessary pain. Acceptance does not mean that a person approves of every situation or stops caring about improvement. Instead, acceptance means recognizing reality exactly as it is in the present moment. When something difficult happens, the first step toward peace is acknowledging the truth of the situation rather than denying it or wishing it away. Many people misunderstand acceptance because they associate it with weakness or resignation. They believe that accepting reality means giving up or losing motivation. But in truth, acceptance creates clarity. When the mind stops fighting against what has already occurred, it becomes free to respond wisely. For example, imagine a situation where someone loses an opportunity they deeply hoped for. Without acceptance, the mind may spend months replaying the event. Thoughts such as, "This should not have happened," or "Life is unfair," may repeat endlessly. Each time the mind revisits the event, it reopens the emotional wound. The past continues influencing the present because the mind refuses to let go. But when acceptance enters the mind, something begins to change. The person acknowledges the reality of the situation. They recognize that the opportunity is gone and cannot be rewritten. This recognition does not erase the disappointment, but it removes the mental struggle against the past. With that struggle gone, the mind becomes capable of moving forward. Acceptance also helps people understand the natural impermanence of life. Everything in existence is constantly changing. Relationships evolve, circumstances shift, and every moment eventually transforms into the next. Yet many people unconsciously expect certain things to remain permanent. When those things change, the mind experiences shock and resistance. Buddhism teaches that impermanence is not a flaw in life, but a fundamental characteristic of existence. When a person truly understands this principle, they begin relating to life with greater flexibility. Instead of clinging tightly to how things used to be, they develop the ability to adapt to what is happening now. This mindset reduces a great deal of unnecessary suffering. If you expect life to remain fixed and predictable, every change will feel like a disturbance. But if you understand that change is natural, the mind becomes more prepared for the movement of life. Another important aspect of acceptance is learning to release control over what cannot be controlled. Human beings naturally want to influence outcomes and protect themselves from difficulty. While effort and intention are valuable, many aspects of life remain beyond personal control. Other people's actions, unexpected events, and the timing of circumstances often unfold independently of our plans. When the mind constantly tries to control these uncontrollable aspects of life, it becomes exhausted. Frustration appears because reality rarely follows our exact expectations. Acceptance provides a different approach. Instead of demanding complete control, the mind focuses on responding wisely to whatever circumstances arise. This shift creates emotional balance. You still act with effort and purpose, but you no longer believe that every outcome must follow your plan. When situations change, you adapt rather than resist. Acceptance also improves relationships. Many conflicts occur because people try to force others to behave according to their expectations. When someone acts differently than we hoped, disappointment or anger may arise. The mind begins creating judgments and arguments in an attempt to correct the situation. However, every individual carries their own perspective, experiences, and understanding of life. Expecting others to always behave exactly as we wish often leads to frustration. Acceptance allows us to recognize that people are shaped by their own journeys. While we can communicate our feelings and set boundaries, we cannot completely control how others think or act. When acceptance guides relationships, conversations become calmer and more compassionate. Instead of reacting with anger or blame, we respond with patience and clarity. This does not mean tolerating harmful behavior, but it means approaching situations with understanding rather than constant resistance. Another benefit of acceptance is the way it transforms our relationship with mistakes. Many people carry deep regret about past actions. They replay decisions repeatedly in their minds, wishing they could return to the past and make different choices. While reflection can be useful for learning, constant regret traps the mind in events that can no longer be changed. Acceptance allows a person to acknowledge past mistakes without becoming imprisoned by them. You recognize what happened, learn from the experience, and gradually release the emotional burden associated with it. This process turns regret into wisdom, rather than allowing it to remain a source of pain. Through acceptance, the mind begins focusing more on the present moment. Instead of being stuck in past regrets or future worries, attention returns to what can be done right now. Each moment becomes an opportunity to respond with awareness and understanding. Living with acceptance also deepens gratitude. When you stop resisting the natural flow of life, you begin appreciating experiences more fully. Simple moments become meaningful because the mind is no longer distracted by constant comparison or dissatisfaction. For example, a peaceful walk, a thoughtful conversation, or a quiet moment of reflection may bring a sense of calm that previously went unnoticed. Acceptance allows the mind to experience life more directly, rather than filtering everything through expectations. Over time, this mindset develops a profound sense of inner peace. Challenges still appear, and life continues presenting unexpected events, but the mind no longer reacts with the same intensity of resistance. Instead of fighting against reality, you respond with patience and understanding. This does not mean life becomes free from difficulty. Challenges remain a natural part of the human experience, but acceptance transforms how those challenges are experienced. They become situations to learn from, rather than battles to resist endlessly. As acceptance deepens, the mind becomes quieter. The constant arguments with reality slowly fade. Instead of thinking, life should be different, the mind begins recognizing the present moment as it truly is. This clarity creates a new kind of freedom. You are no longer trapped by the past or overwhelmed by imagined futures. Your awareness remains connected to the unfolding experience of life. In this state of understanding, peace arises naturally, not because every situation is perfect, but because the mind has stopped struggling against the reality of life. When a person learns this lesson deeply, they discover something extraordinary. Peace was never dependent on controlling the world or eliminating every difficulty. It was always waiting within the simple act of accepting life as it is and responding with wisdom. And from that place of acceptance, the mind becomes free to live fully, calmly, and with quiet understanding. 16. The wisdom of letting go. One of the most powerful lessons within Buddhist philosophy is the understanding that peace often begins with the simple act of letting go. Many people spend a large portion of their lives holding tightly to things that are already gone. They hold on to past arguments, past disappointments, past mistakes, and even past versions of themselves. The mind keeps returning to these memories, replaying them again and again, as if somehow the past can be changed through repetition. However, the teachings associated with Gautama Buddha remind us that clinging to what has already passed is one of the main causes of inner suffering. The mind creates pain not only from the original event, but from the constant attachment to that event afterward. When a person refuses to release these attachments, they carry the weight of the past into every new moment of their life. Letting go does not mean forgetting experiences or pretending that events never happened. Instead, it means releasing the emotional grip that those experiences have on the mind. When you let go, you allow the past to remain where it belongs, behind you, rather than dragging it forward into the present. Many people struggle with letting go because the mind often believes that holding on to something provides protection. For example, someone who has been hurt in a relationship may hold on to anger because they believe that anger will prevent them from being hurt again. Another person may cling to regret because they believe that constantly remembering their mistake will somehow correct it. But in reality, these attachments rarely protect the mind. Instead, they keep old wounds alive. Anger may create temporary feelings of control, but it also drains emotional energy. Regret may appear to offer lessons, but when repeated endlessly, it traps the mind in a painful cycle. Letting go requires recognizing that the past cannot be rewritten. No amount of replaying events will change what has already happened. Once this truth becomes clear, the mind begins to understand that continuing to hold on to the past only creates unnecessary suffering. One of the reasons letting go is difficult is because people often build their identity around certain experiences. A person may define themselves by a past failure, a past success, or a painful memory. Over time, these experiences become part of how they see themselves. Releasing them can feel like losing a piece of identity. However, Buddhist wisdom encourages a deeper understanding of identity. According to this perspective, the self is not a fixed object, but a constantly changing process. Thoughts change, emotions change, and experiences change. The person you were 5 years ago is not exactly the same person you are today. When you understand this fluid nature of identity, it becomes easier to release attachments to past versions of yourself. You realize that growth naturally involves transformation. Letting go of old identities allows new understanding to emerge. Another important aspect of letting go is releasing attachment to outcomes. Many people experience frustration because they expect life to unfold according to specific plans. They imagine a particular path for their career, relationships, or future achievements. When reality moves in a different direction, disappointment appears. While having goals and aspirations can be motivating, rigid attachment to outcomes often creates suffering. When the mind becomes too attached to a specific result, it loses flexibility. Every unexpected change begins to feel like failure or loss. Letting go of rigid expectations allows the mind to respond more freely to life's changes. Instead of viewing every unexpected outcome as a problem, you begin seeing situations as opportunities for learning and adaptation. This mindset does not remove challenges, but it reduces the emotional resistance that often accompanies them. Letting go also improves relationships with others. Many conflicts persist because people refuse to release past grievances. An argument may occur, but the memory of that argument continues influencing future interactions. Resentment builds quietly, and over time the relationship becomes weighed down by unresolved tension. When a person practices letting go, they choose to release the emotional burden of past conflicts. This does not mean ignoring harmful behavior or avoiding important conversations. It means allowing the mind to move forward without constantly carrying the emotional weight of past events. Forgiveness often becomes part of this process. Forgiveness is sometimes misunderstood as excusing someone's actions. In reality, forgiveness is an act of freeing your own mind from the ongoing influence of anger and resentment. When you forgive, you release the emotional attachment that keeps the past alive in your mind. Letting go also applies to attachment to possessions and external achievements. Many people believe that happiness depends on acquiring more success, more recognition, or more material security. While these things can provide comfort and opportunity, they cannot guarantee lasting peace. Buddhist teachings remind us that external conditions are always changing. Wealth may increase or decrease, status may rise or fall, and circumstances may shift unexpectedly. When happiness is tied too closely to these external factors, the mind becomes vulnerable to constant anxiety. Letting go of excessive attachment to possessions and status allows a person to appreciate these things without depending on them for emotional stability. Gratitude replaces anxiety because the mind is no longer constantly worried about losing what it has gained. Another area where letting go becomes important is the fear of the future. Many people carry anxiety about events that have not yet happened. The mind imagines possible problems and prepares for difficulties that may never actually occur. This constant anticipation creates tension that interferes with the present moment. Letting go of excessive worry about the future allows the mind to return to the present. While planning and preparation are valuable, they become harmful when they transform into endless anxiety. Recognizing that the future is uncertain allows the mind to focus on what can be done right now. When letting go becomes a regular practice, the mind gradually becomes lighter. Old memories lose their emotional intensity, expectations become more flexible, relationships become less burdened by resentment. Life begins to feel less like a struggle against circumstances and more like a continuous flow of experiences. This transformation does not happen overnight. Letting go is often a gradual process. Some attachments may take time to release because they are deeply connected to personal history. But each small step toward releasing unnecessary attachment creates space for greater peace. Over time, the mind begins experiencing a new sense of freedom. Instead of being weighed down by past events, future worries, and rigid expectations, attention becomes available for the present moment. Life feels more open and less restricted by emotional baggage. In this state, a person can respond to situations with greater clarity. Decisions are guided by understanding rather than by old emotional patterns. Challenges are approached with patience rather than resistance. Letting go ultimately reveals something profound. Much of the suffering people carry is not caused by life itself, but by the mind's attachment to experiences, expectations, and identities. When these attachments gradually loosen, peace begins to emerge naturally. Life continues presenting both pleasant and difficult experiences. But when the mind is no longer clinging tightly to every outcome, it becomes capable of moving through those experiences with calm awareness. And within that awareness, a deep and steady peace begins to grow. 17. The freedom of living without comparison. One of the quiet habits that steals peace from many people is the constant act of comparing their lives to the lives of others. It often happens so naturally that people barely notice it. Someone sees another person's success, lifestyle, or achievements and immediately begins measuring their own life against that image. The mind starts asking questions such as, "Why am I not there yet?" or "Why does their life seem easier than mine?" These thoughts appear quickly and repeatedly, gradually shaping how a person views their own journey. In Buddhist philosophy, the teachings connected to Gautama Buddha emphasize awareness of the mind and the patterns that create suffering. Comparison is one of those patterns. It may seem harmless at first, but when the mind becomes trapped in comparison, it creates dissatisfaction and unnecessary pressure. Instead of appreciating their own progress, people begin focusing on what they believe they lack. The problem with comparison is that it rarely reflects the full reality of life. When you observe someone else's achievements, you are only seeing a small portion of their story. The struggles, doubts, failures, and obstacles that shaped their journey are often invisible. What appears from the outside as effortless success may actually be the result of years of effort and difficulty. When the mind compares itself to incomplete images of others, it creates unrealistic expectations. A person may believe that they are falling behind simply because someone else's progress appears faster or more visible. This belief can slowly weaken confidence and motivation. Living without comparison begins with understanding that every person's life unfolds in a unique way. Each individual carries different experiences, opportunities, and challenges. Some people discover their path early, while others require more time to understand their direction. Some journeys appear smooth, while others involve many obstacles. Buddhist wisdom encourages individuals to observe their own path with awareness rather than measuring themselves against others. Instead of asking whether you are ahead or behind someone else, you begin asking more meaningful questions. Are you learning from your experiences? Are you becoming wiser than you were before? Are your actions moving you toward greater understanding and compassion? When attention shifts toward these questions, the mind begins focusing on personal growth rather than external comparison. Progress becomes something measured by internal development rather than by visible achievements. Comparison also creates unnecessary competition in areas where competition may not belong. People may feel pressure to achieve certain milestones at a particular age or within a specific timeline simply because others around them have done so. This pressure can cause individuals to rush decisions or pursue goals that do not truly align with their values. Living without comparison allows you to follow your own rhythm. Instead of forcing your life into a timeline shaped by others, you develop patience with your own process. Some lessons require time to understand, and some goals require steady effort rather than rapid success. Another important aspect of freedom from comparison is recognizing the value of individuality. Each person has different strengths, perspectives, and talents. When people constantly compare themselves to others, they may overlook the qualities that make them unique. For example, one person may excel in analytical thinking, while another has a natural ability for empathy and communication. If the first person measures their worth only by emotional expression, they may underestimate their own abilities. Similarly, the second person may feel inadequate if they compare themselves only to logical or technical achievements. By releasing comparison, you allow your natural strengths to develop more fully. Instead of trying to imitate someone else's path, you begin cultivating the qualities that naturally belong to you. Freedom from comparison also strengthens emotional stability. When people measure their happiness against the success of others, their emotional state becomes unpredictable. Seeing someone else's achievement may create feelings of envy or discouragement, while receiving recognition may create temporary pride. This constant fluctuation keeps the mind unstable, but when happiness is based on personal growth rather than external comparison, the mind becomes more balanced. Progress is appreciated quietly, without needing validation through competition. Another important benefit of living without comparison is the development of compassion. When people constantly compete with others, they may begin seeing success as a limited resource that must be fought over. Someone else's achievement may feel like a threat rather than an inspiration. But when comparison fades, the success of others can be appreciated without fear. You begin recognizing that each person's progress contributes to the diversity and richness of human experience. Instead of feeling threatened by someone else's achievements, you may feel inspired or encouraged. This shift in perspective creates healthier relationships. Instead of viewing others as rivals, you begin interacting with them as fellow travelers on different paths. Each person is learning lessons and facing challenges that are unique to their journey. Living without comparison also allows the mind to focus more deeply on the present moment. When the mind constantly measures itself against others, attention is directed outward toward external benchmarks. But when comparison fades, attention returns to the immediate experience of life. This shift often brings a sense of calm. Simple activities, working, learning, spending time with loved ones, or observing nature become more meaningful because they are no longer filtered through the pressure of comparison. Another important lesson in Buddhist philosophy is the understanding that suffering often arises from attachment. Comparison is a form of attachment because it ties your sense of worth to external standards. When those standards change or remain out of reach, dissatisfaction appears. By releasing comparison, you loosen this attachment. Your sense of value becomes rooted in your own awareness rather than in fluctuating external measures. This creates a deeper form of confidence that is not easily shaken by changing circumstances. Confidence developed through awareness is different from confidence built on recognition. Recognition may come and go, but awareness remains steady. When you understand your strengths, values, and direction, you do not need constant reassurance from others. This inner confidence allows you to pursue goals with patience and determination. Success becomes something you work toward with dedication rather than something you chase out of insecurity. Over time, living without comparison creates a profound sense of freedom. The pressure to prove yourself disappears. The fear of falling behind fades. Instead of constantly evaluating your life against someone else's path, you focus on becoming a wiser and more compassionate person. You begin noticing that each day offers opportunities for growth, regardless of how those opportunities compare with someone else's experiences. Progress becomes a quiet and personal journey rather than a public competition. This mindset also encourages gratitude. When the mind stops comparing what it has with what others possess, appreciation for present circumstances grows. Even small moments, such as a meaningful conversation, a peaceful morning, or a lesson learned, become sources of fulfillment. Eventually, you realize that life was never meant to be measured against someone else's story. Each person carries their own experiences, their own lessons, and their own understanding of the world. When you release the habit of comparison, the mind becomes lighter and more peaceful. You walk your path with greater clarity, guided by awareness rather than by competition. And within that clarity, a deep freedom begins to appear, the freedom of living your life exactly as it unfolds, without needing to measure it against anyone else's journey. 18. The strength of silence and inner stillness. In a world filled with constant noise, opinions, and endless conversation, silence has become something many people rarely experience. From the moment they wake up, their minds are surrounded by information, messages, arguments, and distractions. Social media, news, conversations, and responsibilities keep the mind constantly active. Because of this continuous stimulation, many people begin to feel uncomfortable with silence. When the environment becomes quiet, the mind quickly tries to fill that space with more thoughts, more entertainment, or more distractions. Yet within Buddhist philosophy, silence is not seen as emptiness or loneliness. Instead, it is understood as a powerful space where awareness can deepen and the mind can reconnect with its natural clarity. The teachings associated with Gautama Buddha often emphasize the importance of stillness because it allows a person to observe the mind without interference. When the mind is constantly surrounded by noise, it rarely has the opportunity to settle. Thoughts jump quickly from one idea to another, emotions rise and fall rapidly, and attention becomes scattered across many different directions. This constant movement creates fatigue because the mind never truly rests. Silence offers a different experience. When external noise decreases, the mind begins to notice its own internal activity more clearly. At first, this can feel surprising. Thoughts that were previously hidden beneath distractions suddenly become visible. Worries, memories, and emotions may surface because there is no longer constant noise covering them. Many people initially avoid silence because they feel uncomfortable facing these inner thoughts. But this discomfort is actually the beginning of awareness. When you allow yourself to sit quietly and observe your mind, you begin seeing patterns that normally remain unnoticed. You may notice how quickly the mind jumps to future worries. You may notice how often past memories return. You may notice how easily emotions rise and influence your thinking. This observation is not meant to create judgment. Instead, it creates understanding. The more clearly you see the activity of your mind, the more you understand how your thoughts shape your experience of life. Silence also allows the mind to slow down. In everyday life, decisions and reactions often happen quickly. Someone says something unexpected, and the mind immediately responds. A situation appears stressful, and the mind quickly becomes anxious. Because everything happens so rapidly, people rarely have time to observe their reactions. But when the mind becomes familiar with silence, it begins developing a natural pause before reacting. Instead of immediately responding to every situation, you learn to observe what is happening internally. This pause creates space for wisdom to guide your actions, rather than automatic emotion. Stillness, therefore, becomes a source of strength. Many people believe strength comes from speaking loudly, reacting quickly, or asserting control over situations. But Buddhist teachings often present a different form of strength, the strength of calm awareness. When your mind is steady and quiet, you can observe situations clearly without becoming overwhelmed by them. Challenges still appear, but they do not control your emotional state as easily. You remain grounded because your attention is anchored in awareness rather than scattered across distractions. Silence also improves the way people communicate with others. When someone is constantly thinking about what to say next, they may not truly listen to what another person is expressing. Conversations become filled with interruptions, assumptions, and misunderstandings. But when the mind is trained through silence and awareness, listening becomes deeper and more attentive. Instead of preparing responses while the other person speaks, you simply observe and understand their words. This creates more meaningful communication and reduces unnecessary conflict. Another powerful effect of silence is the clarity it brings to decision-making. When the mind is overwhelmed with external opinions and distractions, it can become difficult to understand what truly matters. People may feel confused about their direction because they are constantly absorbing the perspectives of others. Quiet reflection allows those influences to settle. When the mind becomes still, your own thoughts and values become easier to recognize. You begin understanding which choices align with your deeper intentions rather than simply reacting to pressure from the outside world. Silence also helps people reconnect with the present moment. Many individuals spend much of their time either remembering the past or worrying about the future. The mind becomes busy replaying old experiences or imagining situations that have not yet occurred. In moments of stillness, attention naturally returns to what is happening right now. You may notice your breathing, the feeling of your surroundings, or the subtle sensations of the present moment. This awareness creates a sense of grounding that reduces anxiety and mental tension. Through repeated experiences of silence, the mind gradually learns that peace does not require constant stimulation. Instead of feeling restless when external activity decreases, the mind begins appreciating the calmness that silence provides. Another important benefit of inner stillness is emotional balance. When people live in constant noise and distraction, emotions can become amplified. A small problem may feel overwhelming because the mind has not developed the stability needed to observe it calmly. But when stillness becomes familiar, emotional reactions begin softening. Instead of immediately escalating into anger or anxiety, emotions arise more gently and pass more quickly. The mind learns that feelings are temporary experiences rather than permanent states. This awareness creates resilience. Difficult moments still occur, but they no longer dominate the mind in the same way. You begin responding to situations with patience rather than panic. Silence also reveals the simplicity of life. Modern culture often encourages constant achievement and stimulation. People believe they must always be doing something productive or exciting to feel satisfied. This belief can create a sense of pressure that makes life feel exhausting. In quiet moments, however, the mind begins appreciating simple experiences. A peaceful morning, the sound of wind through trees, or the rhythm of breathing can bring a sense of calm that does not depend on external success or recognition. These simple moments remind us that peace is often available in the present if we allow ourselves to experience it. Inner stillness also helps people understand themselves more deeply. When the mind is quiet, insights often appear naturally. Questions about life, purpose, and personal values become clearer because the noise of distraction no longer interferes. Many creative ideas and meaningful realizations arise during moments of silence. Artists, philosophers, and spiritual teachers throughout history have often emphasized the importance of quiet reflection because it allows deeper understanding to emerge. Over time, developing a relationship with silence changes how a person experiences life. Instead of constantly seeking stimulation, you become comfortable with calmness. Instead of reacting immediately to every situation, you develop the patience to observe and respond thoughtfully. This transformation does not require withdrawing from the world completely. Rather, it means learning how to create moments of stillness even within a busy life. A few minutes of quiet reflection, mindful breathing, or simple observation can reconnect the mind with its natural clarity. As this practice deepens, the mind becomes less dependent on external noise for comfort. Silence is no longer something to avoid. Instead, it becomes a place of refuge where the mind can rest and renew itself. Eventually, you realize that silence is not empty at all. It is filled with awareness, insight, and peace. In this quiet space, the mind discovers its natural balance. Thoughts become clearer, emotions become calmer, and life begins to feel less overwhelming. The world may continue producing endless noise, opinions, and distractions. But when you have learned the strength of silence, you carry a quiet stability within you. And within that stillness, the mind finds a deep and lasting peace that does not depend on the noise of the world. 19. The power of returning to the present moment. One of the greatest challenges people face in life is learning how to live fully in the present moment. Although life is always unfolding right now, the human mind often spends very little time truly experiencing the present. Instead, it moves constantly between the past and the future. Memories from the past return again and again, sometimes bringing regret, guilt, or sadness. At the same time, the mind imagines countless possibilities about the future, often creating worry, fear, or uncertainty. Because of this constant movement of thought, many people live far away from the moment they are actually experiencing. Their body may be in the present, but their mind is traveling somewhere else entirely. Buddhist philosophy has long emphasized the importance of awareness of the present moment. The teachings associated with Gautama Buddha repeatedly highlight that true peace and clarity can only be found in the present. The past no longer exists except as memory, and the future has not yet arrived. The only place where life can truly be experienced is the moment that is happening now. Yet the mind often finds it difficult to remain here. Thoughts about what has already happened, or what might happen next, seem to appear automatically. These thoughts can easily pull attention away from the present moment and create emotional tension. For example, a person may replay a past mistake repeatedly in their mind. They may think about what they should have said differently or how they could have acted better. Each time the memory returns, it recreates the same emotional discomfort that originally accompanied the event. Although the situation belongs to the past, the mind keeps reliving it in the present. Similarly, worry about the future can create stress even when nothing difficult is currently happening. The mind imagines possible problems, potential failures, or uncertain outcomes. These imagined situations may never actually occur, but the emotional reaction they create can feel very real. Living in this constant cycle between past and future can make life feel exhausting. The mind becomes filled with thoughts that are not connected to the present experience, and as a result, people may miss many of the simple moments that make life meaningful. Returning to the present moment begins with awareness. It means noticing when the mind has wandered into past memories or future worries, and gently guiding attention back to what is happening right now. This practice does not require forcing thoughts to disappear. Thoughts naturally arise in the mind, and trying to suppress them often creates more tension. Instead, awareness allows you to observe these thoughts without becoming carried away by them. For instance, if a memory appears, you simply recognize that it is a memory. If a worry about the future appears, you acknowledge that it is a thought about something that has not yet happened. By observing the thought, rather than becoming absorbed in it, the mind gradually returns to the present. One of the simplest ways to reconnect with the present moment is through attention to breathing. Breathing happens continuously and naturally, providing a steady anchor for awareness. When you focus gently on the rhythm of your breath, your attention settles into the present. Another way to return to the present is through mindful observation of everyday experiences. Walking, eating, listening, or even performing ordinary tasks can become opportunities to practice awareness. When you bring full attention to these activities, the mind becomes calmer because it is no longer divided between past and future. The present moment often contains far more peace than people realize. Many worries exist only in thoughts about what might happen later. Many regrets exist only in thoughts about what has already happened. When attention returns to the present, these mental burdens often lose their intensity. For example, imagine sitting quietly and noticing the environment around you. You may hear subtle sounds, feel the movement of air, or notice the sensations within your body. These simple experiences exist only in the present moment. When awareness connects with them, the mind begins to relax. Over time, this practice changes how a person experiences life. Instead of feeling constantly rushed by thoughts and worries, the mind develops a greater sense of calm. Situations that once felt overwhelming become easier to handle because attention remains grounded in the present. Another important benefit of living in the present moment is clarity. When the mind is distracted by past regrets or future anxieties, it becomes difficult to see situations clearly. Decisions may be influenced by emotional reactions rather than thoughtful understanding. But when awareness is rooted in the present, the mind becomes more focused. You can observe circumstances as they truly are, rather than through the lens of fear or regret. This clarity allows wiser decisions and more balanced responses to challenges. Living in the present also deepens appreciation for life. Many meaningful experiences pass unnoticed when the mind is distracted. A beautiful sunset, a meaningful conversation, or a peaceful moment of reflection may occur, but if attention is elsewhere, the experience is missed. Mindful awareness allows these moments to be fully experienced. Instead of rushing through life while thinking about the next task or worry, you begin appreciating the richness of each moment. This does not mean ignoring responsibilities or refusing to plan for the future. Planning and learning from the past are valuable when done consciously. The difference lies in not allowing these thoughts to dominate the mind constantly. When reflection about the past is needed, it can be done with awareness and purpose. When planning for the future is necessary, it can be approached thoughtfully without excessive worry. But once those reflections or plans are complete, attention returns to the present. This balance allows the mind to remain stable even when life becomes busy or challenging. Returning to the present moment also reduces unnecessary stress. Many sources of anxiety come from imagining worst-case scenarios about the future. The mind creates detailed stories about events that may never actually occur. When awareness returns to the present, these imagined scenarios lose their power. The mind recognizes that the future is uncertain and that the current moment may actually be calm and manageable. Similarly, regret about the past often fades when attention shifts to what can be done now. The present moment always offers an opportunity to respond differently, to make a wiser choice, or to begin moving in a new direction. Through repeated practice, the present moment becomes a place of refuge. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the endless activity of the mind, you develop the ability to return to a stable center of awareness. This center is not dependent on external circumstances. It exists within your own attention and understanding. Life continues, presenting both pleasant and difficult experiences, but when awareness remains connected to the present, those experiences are met with greater balance. You begin noticing that peace is not hidden somewhere in the future waiting to be achieved. It is often available right now when the mind stops wandering and simply experiences the moment as it is. As this understanding deepens, life begins to feel less like a constant struggle and more like a series of unfolding moments. Each moment contains opportunities for awareness, understanding, and growth. By returning again and again to the present, you gradually free the mind from the heavy weight of past regrets and future fears. And in that simple but profound shift of attention, a deep and lasting peace begins to appear. 20. The quiet joy of living a simple life. In modern life, people are often taught that happiness comes from achieving more, owning more, and constantly moving toward bigger goals. Society frequently measures success through wealth, recognition, productivity, and status. Because of this belief, many individuals spend their lives chasing an endless list of desires. They believe that once they reach the next milestone, buy the next possession, or gain the next achievement, peace and satisfaction will finally arrive. However, the deeper wisdom found in Buddhist philosophy presents a very different understanding of happiness. The teachings connected to Gautama Buddha often emphasize that the mind becomes peaceful, not by accumulating more, but by simplifying life and reducing unnecessary attachment. A simple life does not mean a life without purpose or ambition. Instead, it means removing the excess desires and distractions that make the mind restless. When the mind is constantly chasing new wants and expectations, it rarely experiences contentment. Even when one desire is fulfilled, another quickly appears. This cycle can continue indefinitely, leaving people feeling as though happiness is always just beyond their reach. Simplicity interrupts this cycle by encouraging people to focus on what truly matters rather than on endless accumulation. When a person begins simplifying their life, they start questioning which desires genuinely contribute to well-being and which ones only create pressure. For example, many people feel the need to keep up with the achievements and lifestyles of others. They may pursue certain goals not because those goals are meaningful to them, but because society suggests they should want them. Over time, this pursuit can create stress and dissatisfaction because it disconnects people from their own values. A simple life encourages alignment between actions and values. Instead of chasing everything that appears attractive or prestigious, a person begins choosing goals that genuinely support their inner peace and understanding. This shift often leads to greater satisfaction because effort becomes focused rather than scattered across countless ambitions. Energy that was once spent on unnecessary competition or comparison becomes available for growth, reflection, and meaningful activity. Simplicity also changes how people relate to possessions. In many cultures, material success is seen as a symbol of achievement. While having resources and comfort can be beneficial, excessive attachment to possessions can create anxiety. People may worry constantly about acquiring more or protecting what they already have. Buddhist teachings remind us that material objects are temporary. Possessions may bring convenience and enjoyment, but they cannot provide lasting inner peace. When happiness becomes dependent on possessions, the mind remains vulnerable to loss and change. Living simply means appreciating what you have without becoming overly attached to it. Gratitude replaces constant craving. Instead of believing that happiness depends on acquiring something new, you begin recognizing the value of what already exists in your life. Another important aspect of simplicity is the reduction of mental clutter. Modern life often fills the mind with endless information, obligations, and distractions. People move quickly from one task to another without allowing time for reflection or rest. This constant activity can make life feel overwhelming. Even when nothing dramatic is happening, the mind remains busy with worries and unfinished thoughts. A simple life introduces balance by creating space for quiet awareness. Time is set aside for reflection, rest, and mindful presence. During these moments, the mind has the opportunity to settle and reconnect with its natural clarity. Silence, nature, and mindful activities often play a role in this process. Spending time in calm environments helps the mind slow down and release accumulated tension. Without constant stimulation, awareness becomes sharper and more peaceful. Simplicity also strengthens relationships. When life becomes overly busy and complicated, meaningful connection with others may be neglected. Conversations become rushed, and attention is divided between many responsibilities. But when a person simplifies their priorities, they create more space for genuine interaction. Listening becomes deeper, and time spent with others becomes more meaningful. Relationships shift from being another obligation to becoming sources of warmth and understanding. Living simply also encourages presence. Many people move through their daily routines while thinking about future plans or past experiences. Meals are eaten while checking messages, walks are taken while worrying about work, and conversations occur while attention remains elsewhere. A simple life invites full attention to each moment. Eating becomes an experience rather than a task. Walking becomes an opportunity to observe the environment. Conversations become meaningful exchanges rather than hurried interactions. This presence enriches everyday experiences. Activities that once seemed ordinary begin revealing subtle beauty and calm. Another benefit of simplicity is emotional stability. When people chase too many desires or responsibilities, they often feel overwhelmed. Every setback feels significant because so much energy has been invested in external outcomes. But when life is simplified, fewer expectations compete for attention. This reduces emotional pressure and allows the mind to remain balanced even when challenges appear. For example, if a person defines happiness through many external achievements, failure in one area may feel devastating. But when happiness is rooted in simple values such as awareness, kindness, and growth, temporary setbacks lose much of their power. Simplicity also makes it easier to appreciate the natural rhythm of life. Instead of constantly pushing for more, a person begins observing the flow of experiences with patience. Moments of activity and moments of rest are both valued. This rhythm mirrors the natural patterns found in nature. Seasons change, days alternate between light and darkness, and living beings move through cycles of growth and renewal. When life becomes overly complicated, people may lose connection with this natural balance. By simplifying their lives, individuals reconnect with these rhythms. Work, rest, reflection, and connection all find their appropriate place. Another powerful aspect of simplicity is freedom from comparison. When people pursue complex lifestyles shaped by external expectations, they often measure their progress against others. This comparison creates pressure and dissatisfaction. But a simple life focuses on internal values rather than external status. Success becomes defined by peace of mind, wisdom, and compassion rather than by social recognition. This shift frees the mind from constant competition. Instead of trying to surpass others, a person focuses on becoming more aware and understanding. Over time, this approach reveals a quiet joy that does not depend on dramatic achievements. Happiness begins appearing in small moments. A calm morning, a meaningful conversation, a moment of insight during reflection. These experiences may appear simple, but they carry deep richness when the mind is attentive. Living simply does not require abandoning ambition or avoiding responsibility. Instead, it involves choosing carefully what truly deserves attention and energy. By focusing on what matters most, life becomes clearer and more meaningful. The mind becomes less crowded with unnecessary desires and more open to awareness. Through simplicity, people begin discovering that peace does not come from endlessly expanding their lives with new distractions. Instead, peace appears when life becomes balanced, intentional, and aligned with deeper values. In this way, the quiet joy of a simple life becomes a powerful source of freedom. The mind no longer feels trapped by constant striving or overwhelmed by endless expectations. Instead, it moves through life with calm clarity, appreciating each moment as it unfolds, and within that calm simplicity, a deep and lasting sense of happiness quietly grows. 21. The patience to let life unfold. One of the quiet struggles many people experience in life is the feeling that everything must happen quickly. Modern society often encourages speed, quick success, quick answers, quick results, and immediate progress. People are taught that moving fast means moving forward, and that waiting is a sign of failure or weakness. Because of this pressure, many individuals become impatient with their own lives. They feel frustrated when growth takes time, when situations do not resolve immediately, or when their path seems slower than expected. However, Buddhist wisdom teaches that patience is not weakness. Instead, patience is a form of deep strength. The teachings connected to Gautama Buddha often emphasize that life unfolds through natural processes that cannot always be rushed. Just as a seed takes time to grow into a tree, human understanding and personal transformation develop gradually. When people become impatient with their progress, they often create unnecessary suffering. They begin comparing themselves to others, questioning their direction, or doubting their abilities. The mind becomes filled with thoughts such as, "I should be further ahead," or "things should be happening faster." These thoughts create tension because they attempt to force life into a timeline that may not align with reality. Patience allows the mind to relax this pressure. Instead of demanding immediate results, you begin understanding that meaningful change often requires time and consistent effort. Learning new skills, developing wisdom, and building meaningful relationships are processes that naturally unfold step by step. Consider how long it takes for a person to truly understand themselves. Self-awareness rarely appears suddenly. It develops gradually through reflection, experience, and learning from mistakes. Each moment of insight builds upon the previous one, slowly shaping a deeper understanding of life. Without patience, people may abandon this process too quickly. When progress seems slow, they may believe they are moving in the wrong direction. But often, what appears to be slow progress is actually the natural rhythm of growth. Patience also helps people navigate difficult periods of life. Every person experiences moments of uncertainty, loss, or confusion. During these times, the mind may desperately seek immediate resolution. People want answers, closure, or relief from emotional discomfort. Yet some experiences cannot be resolved instantly. Healing from emotional pain, adapting to change, or understanding complex situations may require time. Attempting to rush these processes can create additional frustration. Patience allows a person to remain steady during these uncertain periods. Instead of resisting the experience or demanding quick solutions, they learn to move through it gradually. This patience does not eliminate difficulty, but it provides stability while navigating it. Another important aspect of patience is the ability to trust the unfolding of life. Many people believe that they must control every aspect of their future in order to feel secure. When events do not follow their plans exactly, anxiety may arise. Buddhist philosophy encourages a different perspective. While effort and intention are important, life contains many factors beyond personal control. Circumstances, opportunities, and interactions with others all influence the path ahead. Patience allows a person to work toward their goals, while also accepting that not everything will happen according to a strict schedule. Instead of forcing outcomes, they focus on consistent effort and thoughtful action. This balance creates a healthier relationship with ambition. Goals remain important, but they are pursued with calm determination rather than with desperate urgency. When results take time, patience prevents discouragement. Patience also strengthens emotional resilience. When people expect life to move quickly and smoothly, setbacks can feel overwhelming. But when they understand that obstacles are a natural part of growth, they become more capable of continuing their efforts even when challenges appear. For example, someone learning a new skill may experience moments of frustration. Progress may seem slow, and mistakes may occur frequently. Without patience, the person may give up, believing they lack ability. But with patience, they understand that mistakes are part of learning. Each attempt becomes an opportunity to improve. Over time, this mindset builds perseverance. Instead of seeking immediate perfection, the individual focuses on gradual progress. This approach often leads to deeper mastery because it allows learning to develop naturally. Patience also improves relationships with others. People sometimes expect others to change quickly or behave according to their own expectations. When those expectations are not met, frustration or conflict may arise. But every person carries their own experiences, habits, and perspectives. Personal change often takes time. Patience allows individuals to approach relationships with understanding rather than constant pressure. This does not mean accepting harmful behavior or ignoring important boundaries. Instead, it means recognizing that growth, both personal and collective, rarely happens instantly. Patience also helps the mind remain calm in everyday situations. Waiting in traffic, standing in long lines, or facing unexpected delays may seem minor, but they can easily trigger irritation if the mind demands immediate convenience. When patience is practiced, these moments become opportunities to observe the mind rather than react impulsively. Instead of becoming frustrated, a person may use the time to breathe, reflect, or simply observe their surroundings. Over time, this habit creates greater emotional balance. Small inconveniences no longer dominate the mind's attention. Another important benefit of patience is the clarity it brings to decision-making. When people rush decisions out of impatience, they may overlook important details or act impulsively. Quick reactions sometimes create consequences that require even more time and effort to resolve. Patience encourages thoughtful reflection. Instead of reacting immediately, a person takes time to observe the situation carefully. This reflection often leads to wiser choices because the mind is not clouded by urgency. Patience also deepens appreciation for life's natural rhythms. Just as seasons change gradually, personal growth follows cycles of effort, reflection, and renewal. Some periods of life may involve intense activity, while others may invite rest and introspection. When people accept these rhythms, they experience less resistance to change. Periods of waiting or uncertainty become opportunities for preparation rather than sources of frustration. Living with patience also encourages gratitude. When the mind stops rushing constantly toward future outcomes, it becomes more aware of present experiences. Small moments that might otherwise be overlooked begin revealing their quiet value. A peaceful conversation, a moment of insight, or a calm evening can bring genuine satisfaction when the mind is not distracted by impatience. Ultimately, patience teaches a profound lesson about the nature of life itself. Not everything unfolds according to a rigid schedule, and not every question receives an immediate answer. Some aspects of life require time to reveal their meaning. When patience becomes part of a person's mindset, life begins to feel less like a race and more like a journey of understanding. Each step contributes to growth, even when progress appears slow. The world continues moving at its own pace, and circumstances continue changing in unpredictable ways. But when patience guides the mind, these changes no longer create the same level of anxiety. Instead, the mind learns to trust the unfolding of life while continuing to act with awareness and effort. In this way, patience becomes more than simply waiting. It becomes a form of quiet strength that allows wisdom, growth, and peace to develop naturally over time. 22. The courage to release control. One of the deepest struggles the human mind experiences is the desire to control everything. People naturally want life to move according to their plans. They want situations to unfold in predictable ways, relationships to behave as expected, and the future to follow a path that feels safe and secure. Because of this desire, many individuals spend a large part of their lives trying to control circumstances that are ultimately beyond their power. The teachings connected to Gautama Buddha often remind us that the nature of life is change. Everything that exists moves through cycles of transformation. Situations shift, relationships evolve, opportunities appear and disappear, and circumstances rarely follow a perfectly predictable path. When the mind attempts to control every aspect of this changing reality, it often creates tension and frustration. The desire for control is not entirely negative. In many areas of life, responsibility and thoughtful action are necessary. People must make decisions, work toward goals, and care for their well-being. However, problems arise when the mind expects complete control over outcomes. When life behaves differently than expected, the mind begins to resist what is happening. This resistance can create emotional suffering. A person may repeatedly think that a situation should have been different. They may feel angry when events do not match their expectations, or anxious when the future feels uncertain. The more tightly the mind tries to control life, the more distress it may experience when reality moves in another direction. Releasing control does not mean giving up responsibility or abandoning effort. Instead, it means recognizing the difference between what can be influenced and what cannot. A person can control their actions, their intentions, and their responses to situations, but they cannot control every outcome, every decision made by others, or every event that unfolds in the world. When this understanding becomes clear, a sense of freedom begins to appear. Instead of constantly trying to force life into a specific shape, the mind becomes more flexible. Effort continues, but it is no longer accompanied by the heavy pressure of demanding perfect results. For example, imagine someone working toward an important goal. They invest time, effort, and dedication into their work. These actions are within their control, but the final outcome may still depend on factors outside their influence, such as timing, circumstances, or the decisions of others. If the mind is completely attached to controlling the outcome, any unexpected result may feel devastating. But when the person understands the limits of control, they can focus on doing their best while remaining open to whatever unfolds. This mindset allows a person to act with determination while also maintaining emotional balance. Success becomes something to appreciate rather than something that defines personal worth. Setbacks become opportunities to learn rather than sources of despair. Another area where releasing control becomes important is within relationships. Many conflicts arise because people attempt to control the behavior or feelings of others. A person may expect someone else to behave according to their wishes, understand their perspective completely, or respond exactly as they hope. But every individual carries their own experiences, beliefs, and emotions. Even when two people care deeply for each other, they may still interpret situations differently. Attempting to control another person's thoughts or reactions often leads to frustration. Releasing control in relationships means allowing others the space to be themselves. It involves communicating honestly and respectfully, while recognizing that each person ultimately chooses their own responses. This perspective encourages compassion rather than domination. Instead of trying to force agreement, individuals focus on understanding one another. When disagreements arise, they can be addressed with patience rather than with rigid demands. Another important benefit of releasing control is the reduction of anxiety about the future. Many people feel compelled to predict and manage every possible outcome in order to feel secure. They create detailed plans and imagine numerous scenarios in an attempt to prevent uncertainty. While planning can be useful, excessive control over the future can create constant worry. The mind becomes trapped in a cycle of anticipation, imagining problems that may never occur. Instead of experiencing the present moment, attention becomes consumed by what might happen later. Releasing control allows the mind to relax its grip on these imagined futures. A person continues to plan thoughtfully, but they also accept that uncertainty is a natural part of life. Instead of fearing uncertainty, they develop confidence in their ability to respond wisely to whatever situations arise. This shift in perspective creates emotional resilience. When unexpected events occur, the mind no longer reacts with panic or frustration. Instead, it adapts with calm awareness. Releasing control also deepens trust in the process of life itself. Buddhist teachings often emphasize that life unfolds through complex interactions of causes and conditions. Every event arises from a combination of factors that are constantly evolving. Recognizing this complexity helps a person understand that not everything can be predicted or controlled. Instead of viewing life as a rigid structure that must follow specific plans, they begin seeing it as a dynamic flow of experiences. This understanding does not remove responsibility for one's actions. Rather, it encourages humility and openness. A person acts with intention while remaining aware that life may reveal possibilities they had not previously imagined. Sometimes the path that appears unexpected or uncertain can lead to valuable lessons and opportunities. When the mind releases rigid control, it becomes more receptive to these possibilities. Another important aspect of releasing control is learning to accept emotions without trying to suppress them. People sometimes attempt to control their internal experiences just as they try to control external situations. They may believe that certain emotions should not exist or that they must always remain calm. But emotions arise naturally as responses to experiences. Attempting to force them away can create additional tension. Releasing control allows emotions to appear and pass without becoming overwhelming. Instead of resisting them, the mind observes them with awareness. Through this observation, emotions gradually lose their intensity. The mind learns that feelings are temporary experiences rather than permanent states. Over time, releasing control creates a profound sense of ease. The mind becomes less burdened by constant tension and more open to the natural flow of life. Situations that once caused frustration become easier to navigate because the mind is no longer fighting against reality. This does not mean life becomes free from challenges. Difficult experiences remain part of the human journey. However, when the mind releases the illusion of total control, these challenges are approached with greater wisdom and patience. Instead of struggling endlessly against what cannot be changed, a person focuses on responding thoughtfully to each moment. In this way, releasing control becomes an act of courage. It requires trusting that life can still unfold meaningfully even without constant management. It requires believing that wisdom and adaptability can guide actions when unexpected events occur. When this courage develops, life begins to feel lighter. The mind no longer carries the heavy burden of trying to manage every outcome. Instead, it moves through the world with calm awareness, acting with intention while accepting the natural uncertainty of life. And within that balance between effort and acceptance, a deep and lasting peace begins to grow. 23. The wisdom of choosing your inner world. One of the most powerful realizations a person can have is understanding that their inner world is something they can consciously shape. Many people move through life believing that their emotions, thoughts, and reactions are completely controlled by external circumstances. When something pleasant happens, they feel happy. When something difficult occurs, they feel upset or anxious. Over time, the mind begins to assume that peace or suffering depends entirely on what happens in the outside world. However, Buddhist wisdom offers a deeper understanding. The teachings connected to Gautama Buddha explain that although we cannot always control events around us, we can gradually learn how to shape the inner world through awareness, understanding, and discipline. This does not mean ignoring reality or pretending difficulties do not exist. Instead, it means recognizing that the mind has the capacity to choose how it relates to experience. The inner world of a person consists of thoughts, emotions, attitudes, beliefs, and interpretations. These inner elements influence how every situation is experienced. Two individuals may face the same challenge, yet experience it in completely different ways depending on their inner state. One person may react with fear and frustration, while another may respond with patience and clarity. This difference is not always caused by the external situation, but by the condition of the inner world observing it. Many people rarely examine their inner world carefully. Thoughts appear quickly and are often accepted as truth without reflection. Emotions rise suddenly and guide behavior automatically. Over time, patterns of thinking develop that shape how a person experiences life. For example, someone who constantly focuses on negative possibilities may develop a habit of worry. Another person who repeatedly reflects on gratitude may develop a habit of appreciation. These patterns gradually become part of the mental environment in which a person lives. Choosing your inner world begins with awareness of these patterns. When you observe your thoughts carefully, you begin recognizing which ones bring clarity and which ones create unnecessary suffering. This awareness creates the opportunity to guide the mind in a different direction. One important aspect of shaping the inner world is the cultivation of mindful attention. Instead of allowing thoughts to wander endlessly through past regrets or future anxieties, you learn to bring attention back to the present moment. This simple practice helps calm the mind and reduce the emotional turbulence created by uncontrolled thinking. When the mind becomes calmer, it becomes easier to observe situations with balance. Challenges are still recognized, but they no longer dominate the entire mental landscape. Instead of reacting impulsively, you develop the ability to pause and respond thoughtfully. Another important element of the inner world is attitude. The way a person interprets events often influences their emotional experience more than the events themselves. For example, a difficult situation may be viewed as a failure or as an opportunity to learn. The external event remains the same, but the internal interpretation changes the emotional response. Buddhist teachings encourage cultivating attitudes that promote understanding and compassion. Instead of viewing challenges as personal attacks, they can be seen as part of the natural complexity of life. Instead of reacting with resentment toward others, one may choose to respond with patience and curiosity about their perspective. This shift in attitude does not remove all difficulties, but it transforms how those difficulties are experienced. Another important aspect of choosing your inner world is the development of emotional awareness. Many people attempt to suppress emotions they find uncomfortable, such as sadness, anger, or fear. While suppression may provide temporary relief, it often causes those emotions to remain hidden beneath the surface of the mind. Through mindful observation, emotions can be acknowledged without becoming overwhelming. When an emotion arises, you simply recognize it as a natural mental experience. Instead of reacting immediately, you observe how it appears, how it changes, and how it eventually fades. This awareness reduces the power emotions have over behavior. Instead of being controlled by sudden reactions, the mind learns to respond calmly and deliberately. Another important influence on the inner world is the environment a person chooses. Conversations, information, and social influences all shape mental patterns. If a person constantly surrounds themselves with negativity, conflict, or comparison, those patterns gradually influence their thinking. Choosing your inner world, therefore, includes being mindful of the influences you allow into your life. Seeking environments that encourage reflection, kindness, and learning helps create a mental atmosphere that supports peace. Another powerful way to shape the inner world is through gratitude. Gratitude shifts attention away from constant dissatisfaction and toward appreciation of what already exists. When the mind repeatedly acknowledges moments of beauty, kindness, or opportunity, it gradually becomes more sensitive to positive experiences. This does not mean ignoring problems or pretending difficulties do not exist. Instead, gratitude balances awareness so that the mind does not become completely dominated by what is lacking. Over time, this habit of appreciation creates emotional resilience. Even during challenging periods, the mind retains the ability to recognize sources of meaning and connection. Choosing your inner world also involves cultivating compassion. Compassion begins with understanding that all people experience struggles, confusion, and emotional pain at different points in their lives. When someone behaves in a harmful or unkind way, it often reflects their own inner difficulties. Responding with compassion does not mean accepting harmful behavior without boundaries. Instead, it means recognizing the shared human experience of suffering and responding with wisdom rather than hatred. Compassion softens the inner world and prevents anger from dominating the mind. Another important element of shaping the inner world is patience. The habits of the mind do not change overnight. Years of conditioned thinking cannot be transformed instantly, but with consistent awareness, small shifts begin to appear. A moment of patience replaces an impulse of anger. A moment of gratitude replaces a habit of complaint. A moment of understanding replaces a reaction of judgment. These small changes accumulate over time, gradually transforming the inner environment. As the inner world becomes calmer and more balanced, external circumstances lose some of their power to disturb the mind. Challenges still occur, but they are experienced differently. Instead of reacting automatically, you approach them with awareness and curiosity. This transformation leads to a deeper form of freedom. The outside world remains unpredictable, but your experience of it becomes more stable. Happiness no longer depends entirely on favorable conditions, because peace arises from the quality of the inner world. Through this understanding, life becomes less about controlling external events and more about cultivating wisdom within. You begin realizing that every moment offers an opportunity to shape your inner world. Each thought, each attitude, and each response contributes to the mental environment in which you live. By choosing awareness over distraction, compassion over resentment, and gratitude over dissatisfaction, you gradually build an inner world that supports clarity and peace. And when the inner world becomes harmonious, the experience of life itself becomes more meaningful, calm, and deeply fulfilling. 24. The deep peace of understanding impermanence. One of the most profound insights in Buddhist philosophy is the understanding that everything in life is constantly changing. Nothing remains exactly the same forever. Situations evolve, emotions rise and fall, relationships shift, and every moment gradually transforms into the next. This principle is known in Buddhism as impermanence, and it plays a central role in understanding how the mind can find peace. The teachings connected to Gautama Buddha often emphasize that much of human suffering arises because people resist this natural truth. The mind tends to cling to things it enjoys and push away things it dislikes. When something pleasant appears, the mind wishes it could last forever. When something difficult occurs, the mind desperately tries to make it disappear. This constant attachment and resistance create emotional tension, because reality does not remain fixed. Impermanence means that everything pleasant or unpleasant is temporary. Joyful experiences eventually change, and difficult experiences also pass. However, many people struggle with this idea because they naturally want stability. The mind seeks certainty and permanence, believing that if life could remain predictable and comfortable, happiness would be secure. Yet life rarely follows such expectations. Events unfold according to countless causes and conditions. Circumstances change, people grow in different directions, and unexpected situations appear without warning. When the mind refuses to accept this constant movement, it becomes trapped in cycles of frustration and disappointment. Understanding impermanence does not create sadness. Instead, it can bring a deep sense of peace. When a person fully accepts that life is always changing, they begin relating to experiences differently. Instead of clinging tightly to pleasant moments or fearing difficult ones, they develop a more balanced perspective. For example, when a joyful experience occurs, such as a meaningful conversation, a moment of success, or a peaceful day, the awareness of impermanence encourages appreciation. Knowing that the moment will eventually change makes it more precious. Instead of taking the experience for granted, the mind becomes attentive and grateful. At the same time, when difficulties arise, the understanding of impermanence offers comfort. Challenges that seem overwhelming in the present moment are recognized as temporary. Emotions such as sadness, anger, or frustration may appear, but they are understood as passing states rather than permanent conditions. This awareness helps reduce the fear that often accompanies difficult experiences. When the mind realizes that every situation eventually evolves, it becomes easier to remain patient during times of hardship. Another important benefit of understanding impermanence is the reduction of attachment. Many forms of suffering arise when the mind clings tightly to people, possessions, or identities. When something changes or disappears, the mind feels as though it has lost part of itself. However, when impermanence is understood deeply, attachment begins to soften. People are still appreciated, possessions are still valued, and achievements are still meaningful, but they are no longer seen as permanent sources of security. Instead, they are recognized as temporary aspects of life's journey. This shift in perspective encourages healthier relationships. Instead of trying to control or possess others, a person learns to appreciate their presence while understanding that both individuals are constantly changing. Relationships become spaces of mutual growth rather than attempts to maintain rigid expectations. Impermanence also helps individuals accept changes within themselves. Many people struggle with the idea that their identity may evolve over time. They may feel pressure to remain consistent with past roles, beliefs, or expectations. But life naturally brings transformation. Experiences shape understanding, perspectives mature, and priorities shift. When impermanence is embraced, these changes are no longer viewed as threats to identity. Instead, they become part of the natural development of wisdom. Another powerful aspect of impermanence is the way it encourages presence. When people assume that time is endless, they often postpone meaningful actions or conversations. They may delay expressing gratitude, forgiveness, or appreciation because they believe there will always be another opportunity. But when impermanence is recognized, the value of the present moment becomes clearer. Each interaction, each experience, and each opportunity carries importance because time moves continuously forward. This awareness encourages kindness and attentiveness. When you understand that moments cannot be repeated exactly as they are, you begin treating them with greater care. Impermanence also reduces fear of failure. Many people hesitate to pursue meaningful goals because they worry about making mistakes or facing criticism. But understanding that circumstances are always changing helps soften this fear. Even setbacks are temporary. A mistake that feels significant today may become a valuable lesson tomorrow. Experiences that seem discouraging in the moment may later contribute to deeper understanding and resilience. In this way, impermanence transforms the way people approach challenges. Instead of fearing change, they begin recognizing it as an opportunity for learning and growth. Another important insight that arises from understanding impermanence is the recognition that emotions are not permanent. Feelings such as sadness, anger, anxiety, and joy all move through the mind like weather passing through the sky. Without awareness of impermanence, people may believe that difficult emotions will last forever. This belief can make emotional experiences feel overwhelming, but when the mind observes emotions carefully, it becomes clear that they constantly shift. A strong feeling may appear suddenly, reach its peak, and then gradually fade. Recognizing this pattern allows a person to observe emotions without becoming completely controlled by them. This awareness creates emotional resilience. Instead of reacting impulsively to every feeling, a person learns to remain patient while the emotion naturally changes. Impermanence also deepens appreciation for life itself. Every experience, pleasant or difficult, is part of a continuously unfolding process. Moments that appear ordinary may later reveal their importance in shaping understanding and growth. For example, a quiet conversation may inspire a meaningful insight. A challenging period may lead to personal transformation. A seemingly small opportunity may open the door to a new direction in life. When impermanence is understood, these experiences are seen as part of a dynamic and evolving journey rather than isolated events. Over time, the awareness of impermanence creates a profound sense of humility. It reminds us that life is larger and more complex than individual expectations. No single person controls the flow of existence, and every experience is part of a vast network of causes and conditions. This humility allows the mind to relax its need for rigid certainty. Instead of demanding that life behave according to fixed expectations, a person learns to move with the natural rhythm of change. Ultimately, understanding impermanence leads to a deeper form of peace. The mind no longer clings desperately to what it cannot keep or resists what it cannot avoid. Instead, it learns to appreciate each moment while it exists and to release it gracefully when it passes. In this way, impermanence becomes not a source of fear, but a source of wisdom. It reminds us that every experience is temporary and therefore precious. And through this understanding, the mind gradually discovers a calm acceptance that allows life to unfold with greater clarity, gratitude, and peace. 25. The freedom of knowing you are enough. One of the quiet struggles many people carry throughout their lives is the feeling that they are not enough. This belief often appears subtly, shaping thoughts and decisions without being fully recognized. People may feel that they must achieve more, prove more, or become something greater before they are worthy of peace, happiness, or acceptance. As a result, the mind becomes trapped in an endless pursuit of validation. From childhood onward, individuals are often taught to measure themselves against standards created by society. Success, intelligence, appearance, wealth, and recognition become common ways of defining worth. While these achievements can be meaningful in practical ways, they can also create the illusion that a person's value depends entirely on external accomplishments. The teachings associated with Gautama Buddha invite a different understanding. Buddhism suggests that true peace does not arise from constantly trying to become more valuable in the eyes of others. Instead, peace begins when a person recognizes the inherent dignity and potential that already exists within them. This does not mean ignoring personal growth or abandoning effort. Improvement and learning are important aspects of life. However, the difference lies in the motivation behind growth. When people believe they must constantly prove their worth, growth becomes driven by fear and insecurity. Every failure feels like confirmation that they are not good enough, and every success feels temporary because the mind quickly searches for the next standard to meet. But when a person understands that their basic worth does not depend on achievements, growth becomes a natural process rather than a desperate pursuit. Learning, improving, and developing skills become expressions of curiosity and purpose rather than attempts to fill an inner emptiness. The belief that I am not enough often arises from comparison. When people observe the accomplishments or lifestyles of others, they may begin to feel inadequate. Social expectations reinforce this feeling by promoting narrow definitions of success. Yet, each person's life unfolds in unique circumstances. Different experiences, talents, and opportunities shape every individual's journey. Comparing one life to another often ignores the complexity behind those paths. Understanding that you are enough does not mean denying areas where improvement is possible. Instead, it means recognizing that your value as a human being is not determined solely by external results. You remain worthy of respect, compassion, and dignity regardless of temporary successes or failures. This perspective creates emotional stability. When the mind no longer depends entirely on praise or recognition, it becomes less vulnerable to the fluctuations of external opinion. Compliments are appreciated, but they do not define identity. Criticism is considered thoughtfully, but it does not destroy self-respect. Recognizing your inherent worth also changes how you approach mistakes. Many people treat mistakes as proof that they are inadequate. When something goes wrong, the mind may quickly conclude that failure reflects a fundamental flaw in character or ability. Buddhist wisdom encourages a more compassionate approach to mistakes. Errors are seen as natural parts of learning rather than permanent labels. Every person who develops skill or understanding has encountered moments of failure along the way. When mistakes are viewed with patience and curiosity, they become opportunities for growth. Instead of reinforcing feelings of inadequacy, they provide insight into how understanding can deepen. Another important aspect of knowing you are enough is the cultivation of self-compassion. People often treat themselves more harshly than they would treat others. When a friend struggles, compassion and encouragement arise naturally, but when facing personal difficulty, the mind may respond with criticism or disappointment. Self-compassion invites a different response. It recognizes that human life includes challenges, confusion, and imperfection. Instead of judging oneself harshly, the mind learns to respond with understanding and patience. This does not weaken responsibility or discipline. Instead, it creates a healthier foundation for improvement. When a person feels supported internally rather than attacked by their own thoughts, they are more capable of learning from experiences and continuing their efforts. Knowing that you are enough also strengthens independence from social pressure. Many people pursue certain goals simply because they believe they must meet societal expectations. They may choose careers, lifestyles, or ambitions that do not truly reflect their inner values. When the mind recognizes its inherent worth, decisions become more authentic. A person begins choosing paths based on genuine interest and meaning rather than on the need for approval. This authenticity leads to greater satisfaction because actions align with personal values rather than external expectations. Another benefit of understanding your inherent worth is the ability to appreciate others without envy. When people doubt their own value, they may feel threatened by the success or happiness of others. Another person's achievement may trigger feelings of inadequacy. But when you understand that your worth does not depend on comparison, the success of others becomes easier to celebrate. Their achievements no longer diminish your value. Instead, they become examples of what is possible within the diversity of human experience. This shift creates healthier relationships. Instead of competing for recognition or approval, individuals support and encourage one another. Recognizing that you are enough also encourages gratitude. When the mind constantly seeks validation, it tends to overlook what already exists. Achievements may be quickly dismissed as insufficient because the mind immediately moves to the next expectation. But when worth is understood as inherent, attention shifts toward appreciation. Experiences, relationships, and opportunities are valued more fully because they are not constantly measured against unrealistic standards. Gratitude creates a sense of abundance even in simple circumstances. A meaningful conversation, a moment of quiet reflection, or a small act of kindness can bring genuine satisfaction. Another important aspect of this understanding is the ability to live with humility. Recognizing your inherent worth does not mean believing you are superior to others. Instead, it involves acknowledging that every person possesses dignity and potential. This humility encourages compassion and respect. Just as you recognize your own worth beyond achievements, you begin recognizing the worth of others beyond their external circumstances. Through this perspective, the mind develops a deeper connection with humanity. Differences in background, ability, or success become less important than the shared experience of being human. Over time, the realization that you are enough transforms how you experience life. Instead of constantly striving to prove yourself, you begin focusing on understanding, kindness, and meaningful effort. Challenges still arise, but they no longer threaten your sense of identity. Successes still occur, but they are appreciated without becoming sources of pride or attachment. Life becomes less about measuring worth and more about exploring growth and awareness. Ultimately, the freedom of knowing you are enough allows the mind to relax its constant search for validation. Peace becomes possible not because every goal has been achieved, but because the mind has recognized its own inherent dignity. In this quiet understanding, effort and ambition remain present, but they are guided by curiosity and purpose rather than by insecurity. And through this shift, a deep sense of calm and self-respect gradually begins to flourish. After exploring these lessons, one truth becomes clear. Much of the struggle people experience in life comes from looking outward too much and inward too little. The mind becomes busy with comparison, expectations, control, approval, and endless distractions from the outside world. Over time, this habit slowly steals peace because attention is always chasing something beyond the present moment. The wisdom shared through the teachings of Gautama Buddha reminds us that true freedom does not come from controlling the world or forcing life to match our expectations. Instead, it comes from understanding the mind and learning where to place our attention. When you begin focusing on yourself, your awareness, your actions, and your understanding, something powerful begins to change. The noise of comparison becomes quieter. The pressure to prove yourself begins to fade. The need to control everything around you slowly loses its grip. You start realizing that peace was never hidden somewhere outside of you. It was always waiting within the quiet space of your own awareness. The world will continue moving in many directions. People will have opinions, situations will change. Success and difficulty will appear and disappear just as they always have. But when your attention is rooted in understanding rather than reaction, those changes no longer disturb your inner balance in the same way. Instead of constantly chasing approval, you begin trusting your own path. Instead of fighting every challenge, you learn patience. Instead of clinging to the past, you learn to let go. Instead of fearing change, you understand impermanence. Instead of searching endlessly for happiness, you discover the quiet peace already present in awareness. Focusing on yourself does not mean becoming selfish or ignoring others. It means strengthening the clarity and compassion within your own mind, so that your actions come from wisdom rather than confusion. When your mind becomes calm and balanced, your presence naturally benefits the world around you. Kindness becomes easier. Understanding grows deeper. Relationships become more genuine because they are not driven by insecurity or expectation. The journey of self-understanding is not something that happens in a single moment. It unfolds gradually through reflection, patience, and awareness. Each moment offers another opportunity to observe your thoughts, to respond with wisdom, and to return your attention to the present. And the more often you return to that quiet center within yourself, the more clearly you begin to see life as it truly is. Not as a competition, not as a race for approval, not as a struggle to control every outcome, but as a continuous flow of experiences through which understanding and peace can grow. So focus on yourself. Let the world do whatever it wants. Because when the mind is steady, aware, and free from unnecessary attachment, you realize something extraordinary. The peace you were searching for was never outside of you. It was always within your own mind, waiting to be discovered.